Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Allow me to call to order the Ferndale City Council meeting of Monday, August the 9th, 2010. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you kindly. Madam Clerk, first item.
That would be roll call, Your Honor. Council members Baker. Here. Galloway. Here. Lennon. Here. Piana. Here. And Mayor Covey.
Here as well. Thank you. All present and accounted for. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Approval of the agenda, Your Honor. And if I may, I would like to ask that consent agenda item 6B, the purchase of the vertical carousel filing cabinet, be removed from the agenda until I have time to seek out alternate pricing.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Is there any objection to removing item B? That was your item anyway, correct? Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. I don't hear any other changes or
Your Honor, under presentations for C, DTE Energy, they're not here tonight. They're not. I'd asked them to prepare a report on the recent power outages. Right. Their engineering division is still working on that. They'd like to come to a future meeting. In the meantime, if any of the council members, any residents have questions about specific addresses and what's going on in their neighborhood, they should please contact my office, and we will forward that to DTE, and then they'll include that in their report in the future.
Well, we'll hope that they're out there working on the boxes and the grid right now. So again, if folks have questions about specific addresses with regards to power outages, electrical outages, send them to the city manager's office, 248-546-2360, and he's also available by email. So we will remove item 4C. Any other changes? If not, a motion to adopt the agenda with those two changes.
I would like to pull consent agenda item C, approval of the contract with the Daily Company for City Hall reorganization as submitted by the city manager. Am I at the wrong spot? Sorry.
You're pulling it, but that's fine.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Eager.
I'll take that as a motion to adopt the agenda as made changes. Is that cool?
Yes.
Is there a second to Councilwoman Piana's motion?
Sure.
Baker seconds the motion. Madam Clerk?
Council members Baker.
Yes.
Galloway.
Yes.
Lennon.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes.
Mayor Covey.
Yes as well. First item, Madam Clerk.
It'd be a presentation of a resolution of condolence for Mr. Ray White.
Yeah, the city of Ferndale lost a patriarch and a good friend last week, and the first item for today's agenda is a resolution of condolence, but also a resolution of praise for Ray White. Ray was well known to many, many people in Ferndale for many decades. My experience largely was with his work as a cable volunteer and also with the Historical Society. Councilman Galloway in a moment is going to read the resolution, but I do want to introduce and ask to come forward his son Walt White and his brother Rich White. Councilman, would you like to read this resolution?
Certainly. Ray was one of the first people I made friends with when I got up here. He was filming all the council meetings, and just immediately was friendly and outgoing, and made me feel right at home. And I was really shocked to hear about your loss. And I think this resolution really details a ton of stuff that he's done, and just his contributions to this community and to the United States are really pretty dramatic. Raymond White, 85 of Oak Park, died on August 4th, 2010. He was born on May 31st, 1925 in Ferndale and was one of 6 children. He graduated from Lincoln High School in 1943 and entered the U.S. Navy soon afterwards. Ray served as a CB and was present on D-Day as he watched the invasion from the caissons his brigade had constructed in the harbor, with the battleships behind him firing over those caissons onto the beach. He was interviewed about his experience for recent World War II documentaries, and after being discharged, he returned to the Ferndale area, where he married his school sweetheart, Mary, who was the daughter of his favorite grade school teacher. He worked at General Motors for over 30 years and was a speechwriter for Fisher Auto Body. Ray was very active in the Ferndale community. He helped the disabled in their spare time. He was a longtime volunteer with WFRN, the city's municipal cable television station, where he could often be seen behind the camera cueing the mayor to begin a council meeting. Ray was a member of the Ferndale Historical Society, serving as a past president and contributing to the book Old Timers Tell It Like It Was, where he related in his typical engaging fashion stories of his youth and growing up in Ferndale. His love for the history of Ferndale was evident as he was instrumental in the effort to install a replica of the Crow's Nest at the intersection of Woodward and 9 Mile. And I think he might have posed for the bronze statue as well, right? Ray loved parades ever since he marched in Detroit's Thanksgiving Day parade as a child. His enthusiasm for parades and his musical skills as a tuba player led him to volunteer for many years as an assistant band director at Ferndale High School. And he was also in a tuba band, right, I believe? Ray served as parade marshal in Ferndale's Memorial Day Parade as well as the 4th of July Parade in Oak Park, where he lived since 1952. He was a recurrent speaker at the Memorial Day Remembrance Ceremony at the Ferndale Memorial Hall. Ray was one of the veterans invited to participate in the Honor Flight Michigan, a nonprofit formed to transport World War II veterans to the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., an honor which touched him deeply. Ray was a man of diverse interests. He enjoyed the Detroit Symphony and the Detroit Tigers. Although he lived in Royal Oak Park for 50 years, he was an active volunteer there. He was always an integral part of Ferndale community as well. Ray's kindness, generosity, community pride, and sense of humor will not soon be forgotten. It is with great sadness that our community says goodbye to this very special man who dedicated so much of his life to the betterment of Ferndale. Ray White will be missed by many, but especially by his loving wife, Mary, brother Harold, daughters Elaine, Hines, and Betty, sons William, Richard, and Walter, 12 grandchildren, and numerous great-grandchildren. Therefore, be it resolved that we, Ferndale's elected officials, do hereby extend our community's condolences to the family of Raymond Henry White. Unanimous consent?
Support. Unanimous consent? Support. Thank you, Councilman, and thank the clerk office for pulling this together so quickly. We appreciate it. Sherilyn. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Councilman Galloway. As you know, Ray loved the city of Ferndale and the people in it as well, and would be very honored that you honored him in this way. So we appreciate it very much and hope we can continue on in our father's stead with good community spirit. And there is a memorial service. He didn't want a funeral per se, so we're going to have a celebration of his life from 1 to 3 this coming Sunday, the 15th, at the First United Methodist Church. And there will be hopefully a lot of great brass music, maybe members from the DSO. I'm putting it all together now, and I'll probably do a little playing myself if I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. We want you to take our wishes to Mary and all of the family. He was very beloved in this town and was a very positive, warm, huggy person, and we all miss him a lot. If I may present this to you, and we'll see you on Sunday as well. Okay?
Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's the next item, please?
We have presentation item B, dedication of the 2010 Dream Cruise to Nelson House.
This is another item that is our desire to honor someone. Nelson House is a longtime community leader in Ferndale. I don't know that any family members were able to come. I didn't see Sean, his son, in the audience. Nelson is still with us, but he's not going to be with us for very long. He's very ill, and Nelson House is considered the founder and the concept person who actually originally came up with the idea of a dream cruise. It was done as a fundraiser for a soccer field for young people. Nelson is very ill and is with us just for a few more days or a couple more weeks. So it was our desire that we dedicate this year's Dream Cruise to Nelson, and we will get this to his family and get it to Nelson so that he sees it and has it. Councilman, would you like to read the resolution?
Certainly. In 1994, Ferndale resident Nelson House had the inspiration for an event to raise funds for a children's soccer field. He remembered the summer nights during the 50s and 60s when young adults would be driving their American-made cars, eager to be seen cruising along Woodward Avenue. With a determination to make a difference, Mr. House and a group of volunteers created what is now formally known as the Woodward Dream Cruise in the summer of 1995. They estimated a number of 30,000 to 40,000 spectators and car enthusiasts would attend, but to their surprise, an estimated 250,000 people participated. Since then, the phenomenon of the Woodward Dream Cruise has grown into a 16-mile radius of Oakland County involving 9 suburban communities. The reputation of the Woodward Dream Cruise has spread beyond the Detroit metropolitan area and the state of Michigan. Car enthusiasts and spectators now come from around the world to participate in the world's largest one-day auto event. Mr. House's inspiration to help the youth in the community has turned into a showcase event that promotes our city as well as others along Woodward Avenue. When it is said that Ferndale is where the dream began, it must be stressed that Nelson House is the man who dreamed it. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, Ferndale elected officials, do hereby express our community's deep appreciation to Nelson House for his dedication to the city of Ferndale, and we recognize his effort to raise funds for a youth soccer field that has culminated in the largest one-day auto event in the world. It was great pride that we officially dedicate this year's event to the Dream Cruise founder, Nelson House. Do I have unanimous support?
Support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman, for reading that. And again, to the clerk's office, thank you for pulling this together so quickly. Invited Sean House, his son, to come tonight. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the family. One of the things that I know the House family is interested in is the possibility of dedicating that soccer field to Nelson, and that can be a future item that we can work with the DPW on. And they're going to be interested in doing that through donations and donation for the family. So if I could pass this down to the city clerk, I'll speak with Sean, and we'll either drop that off at his home or they might be able to pick it up here at City Hall. So thank you again, council members, for that. Madam Clerk, next item.
We have presentation item D, recognition of precinct chair Joel Petrie and participating Ferndale businesses for contributions to the election process. And this is my privilege to present this item. In 2008, one of our longtime election workers had a wonderful idea to get the youth of this community involved in the election process, and he worked with Ferndale High School to put into place what we call our student program, where we recruit students from the high-level advanced government and political science classes. Joel helps me train them, and they come to work for us in the precincts. It's been a hugely successful program. These kids, I shouldn't call them kids, these young adults have a lot of energy and enthusiasm. They pick up the process very quickly. They really are a tremendous asset to our election process and to our election inspectors. With the fiscal year 2010 budget, I cut funding for the student program, and I cut the number of precinct workers in every precinct. Well, Joel went back to Ferndale High, and he got students to volunteer to work the elections. And he didn't stop there. He went and he spent an enormous amount of time and energy going to Ferndale businesses and asking for donations that we could give these children instead of what they had been used to getting in pay. And he was very successful. So tonight I want to do two things. First, I want to recognize our Ferndale businesses who very generously contributed to our student volunteers. Buffalo Wild Wings, Katrina Nidier, the manager. Christine's Cuisine, Christine Davis, the owner. Dairy Queen, Spencer Meyer, the owner. Digital Lane, Ed Lane, the owner. Hawaiian Suntan, Patricia Vesquez. Lenny's Copy Center and More, Lenny Linaway, owner. Luxury Lanes, Paul Stewart, owner. And the 7-Eleven at Pinecrest and 9 Mile, Cindy Heyer, the regular manager. And I want to, again, thank each and every one of these businesses for contributing. The level of community involvement in Ferndale continues to just inspire and awe me. I wanted to go one step further with Buffalo Wild Wings. not only did they contribute to our students, they delivered dinner. Katrina herself and her son delivered dinner to all of our precinct workers on election night, and that was very well received and very well appreciated. So thank you to all of them, and I want to give a special thank you to Joel Petrie, who has manned this program and who has been a huge help to me in the clerk's office. And Mayor Covey has a resolution to read. Mr. Petrie, would you like to come up, please?
Joel. At a regular meeting of the City Council of the 9th day of August, Ferndale resident Joel Petrie has served the city as an election precinct inspector and chairperson since 2004. In 2008, Mr. Petrie conceived of a program to involve high school students in the democratic process, and he enlisted the aid of Ferndale High School principal Herb Ivory, an AP government and politics teacher, Scott Wellborn, to recruit high-achieving students to work as election inspectors. And Mr. Petrie served as a co-trainer with the city clerk to provide in-class election inspector training, and the student program has been very successful, garnering praise from seasoned precinct inspectors for the vitality and skill the students brought to the polling place. And when the city of Ferndale was forced to make budget cuts for fiscal year 2011, including the elimination of pay for student election workers, Mr. Petrie pushed forward with the program, successfully recruiting students to volunteer their time. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we Ferndale elected officials do hereby express our community's deep appreciation to Joel for his dedication and enthusiasm for the democratic process, his commitment of time, and his belief in raising tomorrow's leaders from today's youth. May I have unanimous support? Support. Support. Mr. Petrie, this is for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this. It's an honor, but a real thanks go to Principal Ivory, Scott Wellborn, the teacher, and all the students that they've encouraged to come out here. And yes, I agree with the clerk. The students have done a bang-up job, and we expect them and hope for the best for November. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it a lot. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Presentation item E, Year 5 Energy Report by Siemens Building Technologies, Inc.
Thank you kindly. We have a presentation, I believe. Come on up.
Do any of you want color copies of the presentation?
Sure, I'll take one. Hi there.
Hello. Good evening. Thanks again for inviting us here. Great to be here. I'm Lori Prana with Siemens. This is Derek Decker. And Mr. Bruner is going to help us with the presentation because he has the control.
Okay.
We were invited here tonight to report back year 5 of the energy project that we did with you, completed it 5 years ago. I am an account executive with Siemens. Have been in the business for a little over 25 years, and local, we're in Plymouth. Derek is a performance assurance engineer, so he works with our customers to go back and measure, report, make sure that the savings are being met. He's been in the business for about 8 years, and he works in all markets, so he's got a really wide range of experience. Before this project was put together, Ferndale had quite a few concerns, and they included operations and maintenance costs were rising, utility bills were increasing. Mr. Fotitis had some energy benchmarking done that indicated that the city's greenhouse gas emissions were a little bit higher than probably what they could be. And additionally, there were comfort issues. Equipment was aging and it was beginning to fail, causing emergency calls and again discomfort. And there was also limited capital for needed improvement. So we put together a project that could be done using the savings to pay for the improvements. And they were about $1 million of improvements, and they included lighting retrofits, LED traffic signals, an energy management system expansion, boilers, radiant heat system, and vending machine operation, or optimization. And I'm going to turn over the numbers part to Derek.
All right. So, as you can see on the screen above you, or behind you, this year we managed to save $96,988. What this equates to is basically without the project being implemented, there would have been around $250,000 in utility costs. But instead, we ended up with only $182,714. Next slide, please. So another benefit besides reduced cost is, like Lori mentioned, the reduction in greenhouse gases. So cumulatively, over the past 5 years, we have about 5.3 million pounds of CO2 emission reduction. This is about 440 cars off the road, or 16.8 acres of forest preserved. So over the 5 years that we've had the project in place, we've managed to save $444,000. This is 31.5% reduction in energy costs, which is very substantial. And we've managed to exceed the guarantee every year so far. So in year 5, our target was $62,600, and we managed to save $96,990. So we were roughly $34,000 over our guarantee. So back to Lori.
A couple of really great things that have come of this, in addition to the energy savings and the improved comfort. Ferndale has actually been recognized for this project. They are one of 5 cities, or you are one of 5 cities that was recognized by the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth for your efficiency. There's actually a case study that the state of Michigan did for our project that we did with you. And it's at this website that we put up here for you to check out if you're interested. And Mr. Fotitis had a very nice quote in the CNG newspaper where he stated that the results of this project has been a win-win for the city. It found a way to become more efficient, reduce carbon footprint, and reduce how much you're spending. Any questions?
I guess I've got a question. I see that our savings grew for the first 4 years of the project and declined a bit this year. Is that due to energy cost fluctuations or some, other aspect?
I can step in on that. Basically, the main difference was because of the library project that you guys are doing, and we found it not to be fair to claim that since the library was shut down for half the year to say that we were saving that extra money, so we excluded that savings. So actually, the numbers are a little bit less, but it's not because of a reduction or a change in cost. It's more because of an exclusion of the FIMS that we changed in the library.
And so then next year that would be included back in again?
Well, we'd be willing to, work with you on that, but is the old library still going to be used, or is it going to be, it'll be a new library?
Well, it's done, yeah. I mean, it's
Right.
already built over
So
there, retrofitted.
we'll be more than willing to, take a look at your new library for you and analyze the utility usage, to see where you're at with that. But since we didn't do any improvements in there, it's not
It wasn't part of the
part of
program.
our project.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
no problem.
Hopefully, it's being a greener, very green library, and maybe we can, we probably don't want to spend money studying it, but we would love to see if there's some way, so maybe we can figure that out.
Library board can if they want.
Library board could. Other questions? We appreciate your work. We appreciate the good publicity. If we're a model or if other cities can replicate what we've done, that's an excellent thing. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity. Have a good night.
Absolutely. All right, we might want to turn the lights back on, and we'll move to the next agenda item, which is call to audience. The call to audience is a section of the meeting guaranteed to be a half hour at least. It is 5 till, so we'll go to 25 after the hour. If there are more folks who wish to speak, we can carry on the call to audience afterwards. This is for anyone to speak on any item that is not on the agenda. On the agenda tonight, we do have millage questions, charter amendment regarding the supervision of police and fire chiefs, and also consideration of noise issues. So, other than those three, you may speak on any issue. We ask that you keep it to 3 minutes or less. We ask that you share your name and address, verbally or written down, and we remind folks to keep your remarks on point without unnecessary drama. We ask that you please refrain from unnecessary histrionics and no personal attacks. Thank you. Hi there.
How you doing, Mayor Covey? Sean House, son of Nelson House. I'm sorry I just missed the presentation. Unfortunately, I was caring for my dad, so I did want to update City Council that he is probably in his last days as it stands right now, so he may not last till the Dream Cruise. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the overall impact that he had and how the whole Dream Cruise came to be, if you'll allow me. Briefly, for those of you who don't know, we began in the early 90s with something called the Kids Dreamfield Foundation. The Kids Dreamfield Foundation the main purpose was to raise money, $80,000 for the regrading and a soccer field, which was to be located on, and currently is located on, Woodward Heights, just west of the church next to Webb. And so he did a lot of fundraisers around town to get that, and he thought in 94, 95 that it would be a good idea to have a car show here in Ferndale to raise money for that project. And in the process of planning that, as you well know, you were involved with, I remember you back in those days, that when we were both much younger, we began planning it, and then he thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we, at the end of the car show, they poured out onto Woodward like they did back in the old days, and that's how the Kids Dreamfield Foundation became the Woodward Dream Cruise. And it started out with 250,000 people the first year, and it's averaged the last few years over $1 billion in impact to the region for what it did. So I'm very grateful to my father for what he did, and very grateful to the council for the things that they did in their dedication of the Dream Cruise to my father this year. So I wanted to say thank you on that behalf, and I'd also like to ask the council, that field, most folks around town are very familiar with the Dream Cruise, but are not familiar with the fact that that field is directly tied to it. So what I would like to ask the council is their support in putting together some kind of memorial plaque or something showing that that was the Kids Dream Field which began the Woodward Dream Cruise. The only thing that I request is that we make it all donations from personal and corporate, that no taxpayers be charged in that in any way, shape, or form. I think that's the way my dad would want it.
Appreciate that, Sean. As you know, we did pass a resolution. I will ask the city clerk to present that to you. Our wishes go out to you and your family in this time. Please keep us informed, Sean, of your dad, and let him know that we're thinking of him and that we dedicated this year's Dream Cruise to him. And as I mentioned to you, I personally will work with you we'll research that foundation, see if it still exists. Otherwise, we could use the Ferndale Community Foundation as a depository for funds. And I saw Mr. Fotides nod his head when I suggested that perhaps we could dedicate that soccer field in some manner to your dad with a plaque or something like that. So the wheels are turning, and we'll make that happen.
So, thank you. I want to say thank you again to all of you.
Good luck to you, Sean.
Good evening. My name is Julia Music, 497 West Troy Avenue. And I wanted to invite Ferndale residents to join the Ferndale Adoption Network. We're a network of parents and adoptees, adoptive foster families, waiting families, wannabe adoptive families, both internationally and domestic adoptions. We would like anyone in Ferndale to join so that we can meet each other and support each other through the adoption process. Our first event's also coming up, so if you can find us on Facebook and join, we can get you invited to the event as well. To find us on Facebook, you look up Ferndale Adoption Network, and a picture will pop up, and if you add on, I will be able to invite you before the picnic happens.
When is your picnic?
Our picnic is on the 29th, but I would rather give the location to people who are
Absolutely.
invited.
So families that have adopted children that wish to adopt or have adopted.
It's Ferndale, so any combination of anything dealing with adoption or fostering, any people are welcome. Ferndale Adoption Network is the name.
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
Thank you, Mrs. Music.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, Council, Douglas Christie, Ferndale resident, representing the Sierra Club Green Cruise event, which is next Saturday in downtown Ferndale. That would be August 14th. The event, the main part of the event is from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have 2 morning bike rides, one at 8 and one at 9. You can arrive slightly early, fill out the waiver, and join those. There's no pre-registration necessary. The parade is at 11 o'clock, and again, there is no registration for that. We just ask or require that it's all human-powered forms of transportation, hence the Green Cruise, the celebration of human-powered transit. This is our 6th year, and we are happy and thankful to be in downtown Ferndale once again. The event is on Planavon Street and the Withington parking lot just west of Woodward Avenue, north of 9 Mile. And I wanted to thank some of the Ferndale, we have many sponsors, but I wanted to thank some of the Ferndale sponsors and mention to the audience some of the events that are going on. We have a large nonprofit section, Fern Care, the Time Bank, and the library, for example, will be there, along with Wags and Wishes, the local animal rescue. Wags and Wishes will be adopting pets that day. So if you have been thinking about that, that would be a great opportunity to meet the team that's making a big effort in the city there. I mentioned the library. The summer reading program is doing a bottle returnable drive. If you bring your 10-cent bottles to the event and turn them in, the funds are going to a wildlife rescue group in the Gulf to try to save some more of the animals down there. Some of the businesses involved, Garden Fresh Salsa, the New York Bagel, and Western are all donating free food. Snap Fitness will be giving away gym memberships and other prizes. Ferndale Bike Shop will be there doing some checkups and some other prizes. The WAB is involved. Green Thumb Garden Center will be donating a free composter. Greenleaf Bodywork Massage. She will be not only doing free massages, but raffling off 2 free 1-hour sessions. No pins required. The new store on Woodward that opened up for green diaper care and other things for the young ones will be there, along with green, oh boy, I got to read my small print here, sorry. The Green Daffodil Studio over on Livernois. Sorry, ladies. Very cool place. It has some handmade soap and candles and other cool things there. We have a hotline number, 248-709-9301, and you can also find us on Facebook or at the sierraclub.org/greencruise. And again, that's August 14th from 10 to 3, bike rides at 8, 9, parades at 11. And it is a free event, and we do encourage you to ride your bike. We do have a free bicycle valet service there to keep an eye on your bike and your items while you're walking around enjoying the free event.
Is there a rally or a location then where you go to after the parade?
The parade goes down 9 Mile. It's escorted by the police with their volunteers and the officers. Some of them will be on bicycles. And so it goes down 9 Mile towards Livernois, cuts through to the Withington Street, and then comes back right to where it started on Planavon Street, which is where the children's activity area is, with face painting, a climbing tower. We have all kinds of other activities for the children that day also.
So if people want to donate bottles for this fundraiser for animals in the Gulf, where do they turn them in?
That would be at the library. We'll have a booth there. So the Friends of the Library and some of the employees of the library will be there, along with some of the youth, collecting those bottles.
On Saturday?
On Saturday the 14th.
All day?
10 to 3. And I believe probably afterwards, I don't have the exact details, but you could probably take them over to the library or contact the library directly.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. Did you have something on Tuesday you wanted to mention as well?
I can wait.
Okay. Okay.
Take my 3 minutes now.
All right.
Robert Porter, 855 Marshfield in Ferndale. Good evening, Council. First of all, 3 quick things. Congratulations. 1, to our city attorney for the work that he did on the medical marijuana. The detailed research and getting it back so expeditiously, I think, was really magnificent. I want to thank you for that. Secondly, obviously, it's been a great week for mayors in Ferndale. I'd like to congratulate Mayor Covey on his primary election win, and also previous Mayor Chuck Getter for being appointed as a judge of the 43rd District Court in Madison Heights. Congratulations to both of you for that. Lastly, I don't know if you're aware of it, but Dunkin' Donuts was closed for a few days. I've met the new owner, and she's a wonderful entrepreneurial spirit who, as we talked, she said, geez, I'd like to be involved in doing things for kids in the arts programs in the schools. And of course, I talked about your Dine Out program and other things like that. She's very spirited and interested in doing things and putting back into the community. I've tried to say her name twice without having it phonetically spelled in front of me, and I've messed it up, but I will get her down here. But I want you to know that they are now open. She's upgraded the interior of the place, all the equipment and so forth to make it top-notch. And they are here to serve our community. And so stop by and say thanks and welcome them in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hello, Will from American Pop, 175 West 9 Mile. I wanted to ask you, Mayor, about the pub crawl. It seemed very successful. Was it a good, successful?
Yes, it was, sir.
Is that an event that you created?
Yes, it was. With some other folks, yes.
And then when you become commissioner, will you still be involved in that event?
I hope to be involved in that event. It's been managed for the last 6 or 7 years by the Michigan AIDS Coalition, if that group continues to want to put that on, but I don't think it's going to go away. So
good. I saw a lot of turnout, a lot of people walking around for the first couple hours. There was a good police presence. I think everybody had a good time. I handed out quarters to the meters, popcorn, candy, cigarettes that are still legal. I'm hoping maybe next year we could find a group that can promote business downtown and find a way to get those people into the buildings, into the stores at the same time. I stayed up until about 10 o'clock at night as a store owner, so I did pretty good and met a lot of new people. I also wanted to thank Michael Leary, who's handling the Dream Cruise, who works right here in this building with you. And he created a sidewalk sale on the Thursday, which leads into the weekend of the Dream Cruise, and he's finding a way to also work with the store owners to get the people off the street and actually right into the stores for a city event, which is really cool. And then I want to ask you about the item you pulled on C. Does that mean that the money, or you haven't actually approved the budget for remodeling the city hall? Is that something that's still we're talking about going back and forth on, or?
Item C has not been pulled.
Well,
was it?
Well,
It will be shortly.
I did it out of order.
Okay.
So,
It's coming.
it's coming.
Oh, okay.
You could pull it if you wish to discuss it. It's not been pulled. It was item C under presentations that has been removed. Item B, as in boy, was pulled for, it's been removed as well. So when we get to that, if you choose, you or someone else could have it pulled for further discussion.
I just want to comment, when I was here paying taxes, I noticed the city clerk, Marnie, she had this really cool cubicle built. And I think some people took some initiative and just made that happen. It was really nice. And whoever did that did a really good job. And I was wondering, I know that we need to make changes really quickly, but is there a reason why we haven't considered like local design firms or promoting, even if it was like a floor or a room at a time, getting people involved locally with an estimate or doing design concepts to redo the city hall? I mean, we can't come in obviously with sledgehammers and redo the lifts and things like we were talking about last week, but as far as like making it flow more freely or having office equipment or furniture donated by local, has that ever been a consideration?
Not wanting to really go into full detail addressing it under this section of the meeting, the city manager could probably explain that either if that item is discussed or during his call. It's been on previous agendas, right?
Oh, yes, okay.
Were there bids? We did bids. whether-
Yeah, the short answer is that the city went through a selection process to select design build teams for the municipal building project. That project's been delayed indefinitely, but we went back to those teams for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Will. I see Michael Larry approaching the dais, the coordinator of the Dream Cruise.
Mayor. Well, as you all know, that August 19th, 20th, and 21st is our 16th annual Ferndale Woodward Dream Cruise. As part of the Ferndale excitement, Ford Motor Company, our presenting automotive sponsor, will be showcased at 9 Mile in Woodward and be the largest presence of a U.S. automaker along Woodward and the Woodward Dream 16-mile route. The 16th annual Ferndale Woodward Dream Cruise will feature our traditional attractions on East 9 Mile, including the official Woodward Dream Cruise ribbon cutting ceremony, which will be the master of ceremonies, correct? Yes.
Is that on Friday, sir?
Yes, sir, at 5 o'clock. The Ferndale Emergency Vehicle Show will be from 1 to 8 p.m. with our Lights and Sirens cruise at 5:30 immediately after the ribbon cutting. On Saturday, we have the Ferndale Classics and Cruisin' Legends Vehicle Show in the Mustang Alley. And, of course, for the 3 days, we have our signature Rockin' Live entertainment featuring live rock and roll sounds from 17 live bands. Also, an exciting feature that we'll have this year for the 3 days is Xbox 360 Connect Experience Tour, which will actually feature the new technology that will be coming out this fall. We will also have the merchants and food vendors, the Kids Play Zone, and of course on Thursday from 1 to 9, we are not only just having our fun Kids Play Zone and the live entertainment and the food court, but we're also doing the Thursday Family Fun and Sidewalk Sale. During this time, those participating retailers in downtown Ferndale will have sidewalk sales, but we will also have kids DIY cupcake decorating featured by Pinwheel Bakery. And then we will also be giving out free helium balloons to all the kids on Thursday. So we certainly welcome all families to come out and have a good time on Thursday, as well as Friday and Saturday. And I want to also let you know that the Beehive Jive is on Friday this year instead of on Sunday because of our making the event from Thursday through Saturday. And that's always a really fun experience to see the creativity of some of these hairstylists. And certainly, of course, more than anything, I want to thank the City Council. I want to thank the Fire Department and the Police Department for their support. And certainly, I want to thank Ford Motor Company because without them, a lot of this we would not be able to do. So it's another exciting year. Thank you.
Getting ready. The concerts, are they throughout the area or are they concentrated at?
It's concentrated on West 9 Mile and on East 9 Mile only.
Concerts. And
yes.
Thursday night?
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And you can see a listing on FerndaleDreamCruise.com.
Thanks, Mr. Larry. Appreciate it. All right. So it looks like you can go for round 2 on Green Cruise items.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council again, Douglas Christie, Ferndale resident up here this time with the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission. We have our Green Tuesday series, which is the second Tuesday of each month at the Cullick Community Center over in Livernois. And this topic for this month, which will take place tomorrow, is on Ferndale Complete Streets and also a Bicycle Commuting 101 workshop. Our council member, Melanie, will be the presenter for the Complete Streets program. I'm not sure if you're having any discussion announcing that tonight, but I am right now. And then the second half of the event, the Continental Bike Shop will be doing a Commuting Bicycle 101 workshop, a hands-on process. So if you have questions about riding your bike to work or around town, they'll have some experts there for that. And then afterwards, weather permitting, we're going to do a little green bicycle tour of Ferndale and end up probably over at the WAB, maybe a little quick trip past the library. And that starts at 6:30, goes to about 8 o'clock, and then the ride would follow thereafter, immediately thereafter. More information can be found on our Facebook page. That would be the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission, or the hotline which is similar to the Green Cruise hotline, 248-709-9301. Again, it's tomorrow, Tuesday, the 10th. And of course, all of you are invited, as you are to the Green Cruise, which I forgot to mention. So we'll hope to see everyone there.
And that begins at
6:30 tomorrow.
6:30 at the library.
Yes. No, at the Color Community Center.
Kulik Center.
Kulik Center.
6:30.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
It's a fascinating, wonderful topic. I know, I've heard that Melanie's presentation is excellent. Complete Streets is a pretty neat concept.
Yeah. Very timely right now, too, because it was just signed into law by the governor, and a lot of great things coming our way, hopefully, that you'll hear about on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak during the call to audience? Now would be your time. Seeing none come forward, then, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
That brings us to the consent agenda, Your Honor. Item A, approval of the minutes of the meeting held July 26th. Item B has been removed from the agenda. Item C, approval of a contract with the Daily Company for City Hall reorganization. Item D, approval of the proposal for Metro Computer to provide hardware and installation to the city at a cost of $58,911. Charged to the Public Improvement Fund, capital outlay, number is listed. And item E, approval of the bills and payrolls is certified by the city manager to be paid subject to review by the Council Finance Committee.
Well done, in its brevity. Would anyone like to pull any item for further discussion?
C.
Thank you. Item C, as in cat, has been pulled.
Again.
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with all of the items except B and C?
I would move to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item B until a future time and the item C being pulled until the end of the regular agenda. Support.
Seconded by Piana, motion by Baker. Thank you kindly. Any discussion, Madam Clerk?
Council members Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
And Mayor Covey.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Then to the regular agenda, Madam Clerk.
That brings us to regular agenda item A, consideration of the millage ballot questions options.
Mr. Bruner, are you going to address this issue?
Thanks, Your Honor. I will. Tonight I'm going to give a presentation which builds upon the presentation that I gave on July 12th. At that time, I presented the city's long-term financial plan and began to outline some millage options for the council. The council had some additional questions and information that it wanted, so hopefully tonight's presentation will provide that. First, a quick review of the long-term financial plan. Again, for more details, folks can refer back to the July 12th meeting. But the short story is that the city's three largest revenue sources are going to drastically and simultaneously decrease during the next 3 years. Meanwhile, the overall cost of doing business is going to continue to increase by about 3.5% annually. And this is what those trends look like in a chart format. You can see the blue line. The blue lines indicate our revenues to date, and the red lines indicate the expenditures to date. Those straight lines are the trend lines. You can see obviously they're very close to one another, with revenues being slightly above expenditures, thankfully. And then in the future, you can see that purple line shows our best case scenario for our expenditure forecast for the next 3 years. And you can see it's almost perfectly parallel to the trend line over the last several years. But the revenue line, which is the green line, goes down pretty drastically, which is due in large part to the fact that the city's property tax revenues are going down and the state shared revenues are going down as well. So in financial terms, that big gap between the purple line and the green line means that the city's going to be facing deficits in the coming years. And those deficits could range anywhere from about $2.2 million to $9.4 million in the first year under the best case scenario versus the third year under the worst case scenario. But either way you look at it, we're looking at cumulative deficits over the course of the next 3 years of somewhere between $11.8 and $19.6 million. Now, there was a question at the last meeting about when some of the current millages might expire. The Hazel Park schools have a very small debt millage that will expire on December 31st of 2010. Beyond that, you're looking at an additional 5 years until the city's current debt service millage will expire, and then the rest of the Hazel Park schools millage doesn't expire until 2032. The Ferndale Public Schools millage will expire at a date to be determined, but the school districts have the ability to levy up to 7 mills with voter approval, and it's in all likelihood that even after those millages expire, the schools would ask the voters to renew them. So we don't have any immediate millages. Don't have any millages expiring in the very near future. Any questions about that?
The only question is that the Hazel Park Public Schools millage obviously only affects the Ferndale residents who use the Hazel Park Public Schools.
Yeah, it only affects the taxpayers that live in the easternmost part of the city pay Hazel Park school taxes. That's correct.
So we have no millage is retiring or expiring in the next 3 years?
Not in the next 3 years, no. The city's debt service millage will expire in 2015.
I thought something was expiring in the next year or two.
Well, the debt on the HVAC systems that Siemens talked about earlier, that will be retired, but that's not paid by a dedicated millage. That comes out of the general fund, and that will be retired in about 3 years.
How much is that per year, roughly?
It's about $125,000 a year.
Okay, so that's a tiny bit of good news.
A tiny bit of good news, yes.
Thank you.
The bad news comes in 7- and 8-digit numbers, and So the first option that we discussed on the 12th was a Headley override. The city charter limits the city's general millage to 20 mills. That has been permanently reduced from 20 to about 14.5 mills by Headley rollbacks in the fiscal year that ended in 2007, and it's been there ever since. It can't be increased without voter approval. With voter approval, the city council could levy back up to that 20 mills. Now, what that would mean if the voters approved the Headley override and the city levied the 20 mills, here you see what the total tax revenue that would generate in each of the next 3 years under the best case and the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is where property values are declining less than the county forecast. So with values declining less, the millage would generate more revenue. And then under the worst case scenario, which is the county's projected reductions in taxable value over the next 3 years, it generates less revenue. In either case, a Headley override is only enough to balance the fiscal year ending 2012 budget under the best case scenario without further cuts. Beyond that, under the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, a Headley override alone would not allow the city to continue providing the same level of services as it is today. It would require further cuts. Under the best case scenario, a cumulative cuts over the course of the 3 years of $2.7 million, and under the worst case scenario, $11.3 million.
And Bob, this assumes a Headley override at 20 mills?
That's right, the maximum 20 mills.
May I ask, does this include roughly then spending as current? In other words, this does not include any further cuts in personnel. I assume it does not. Does this include or not include any concessions by the unions?
That's correct. It includes the current level of personnel, current level of staffing and services increasing at 3.5% a year over the next 3 years.
Okay, so taking the middle, not the best or the worst case, but a middle scenario, even if a millage passed next year of up to 4.5, 5 mills to take it back up to 20 mills, even then, without concessions from the labor unions, we would still be in massive debt and have to lay off many more people.
Yeah, absolutely. A Headley override alone will not be enough to maintain the current level of personnel and staffing indefinitely. Any other questions on this slide before I move on? Increasing the city's general millage rate by about 5.5 mils, which is what the Headley override would do, would increase the total principal residence tax rate by about 11%. So if your value stayed the same from one year to the next, the amount of taxes that you paid would increase by 11% because the rate would increase by 11%. This is what that does to the average principal residence tax bill. Here you see the blue line is what has happened to the average tax bill to date. In fiscal year ending 2007, that's when the city's operating millage hit its current low of about 14.5 mils. But even though the rate stayed the same, the average tax bill went up for the next 2 years because values were going up. And so it peaked in fiscal year ending 2009. In the 2 years since then, the average tax bill has gone down back about to where it was in 2007. And the red line shows what I called here on the slide is the lowest tax bill scenario. Because when you get into calling stuff worst case or best case, it kind of depends on which perspective you're looking from. And here from the taxpayer's perspective, they might look at the lowest tax bill being the best case scenario. The city might look at it as the worst case scenario. So, but in any event, you see here this red line shows where we're headed if the rate doesn't change, and it kind of mirrors where we've been, only an opposite. And then the green line shows what would happen to that average tax bill with a Headley override and with property values decreasing slowly. So this is kind of the most the average tax bill might go up under a Headley override. And as you can see, it doesn't catch up to its peak in 2009. Even with the Headley override, the average taxpayer would pay less in 2012 than they did in 2009 or even 2010. So it doesn't catch the city up to where we were. It just kind of puts a little more money in the budget than would otherwise be there.
I think that's an important point, Bob. So what you're saying is that because of the decline overall in our tax base, even if we raise our tax rate, most citizens, the average citizen, would not be paying more in tax dollars than they were in 2009 and 2010.
That's correct. Depending on how rapidly values decline, the average taxpayer may continue to pay less than they did in the past, even if the rate goes up. And we'll get into a little more detail about what the range of that millage rate might be later on in the presentation, because obviously between the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, there's a range of millage rates that might have the average taxpayer paying more or less than what they did previously. Okay, option 2 is a public safety millage. This falls into the category of special purpose millages, and as we discussed last time, the Attorney General has opined that they have to be authorized by the charter specifically. The Ferndale City Charter does not currently authorize any special purpose millages, so a charter amendment would be required in order to implement one. That requires a 2/3 vote of the City Council to put it on the ballot, and then 50% plus one vote of the electors to approve it. This is what our public safety, the net cost of public safety services looks like in a chart form. The bottom line across the bottom of the chart is a red line. It's the fire department. That's what the net cost of the fire department has been from fiscal year ending 2007 projected out into the future to fiscal year ending 2012. You can see there it's kind of straddling the $3 million mark. The next line above that is the police department, the blue line, and you can see there it's a very similar trend, but it's a bigger number. It was below $6 million, and now it's up straddling $7 million in the years ahead. Now, the green line is the city's actual property taxes that it has collected and will collect in the future. And as you can see, the green line is going down, and in 2012, it just about meets the police department expense. So in 2012, all things remaining the same, the amount of property taxes that the city collects will be just enough to pay for the police department and nothing else. Now, the purple line is red plus blue. It's police and fire together. And as you see there, the purple line crossed over and exceeded the green line, the property tax line, in fiscal year ending 2008. So since then, the city's actually been spending more on police and fire than it's been collecting in property taxes. So what that means is that Ferndale property taxpayers haven't been paying the net cost of providing public safety services since fiscal year ending 2008. Since that time, the city's been relying on other revenue to maintain that level of public safety spending. And as we discussed at the last meeting, the next largest source of revenue is state revenue sharing. That's gone down dramatically over the last several years and will continue to go down. And then district court revenue is a distant third in overall general fund revenue. So in order to figure out what a millage to support public safety, how much of a millage would have to be levied, you have to understand what the cost is. And here's some of the same information shown in a little bit different way. Here we have the net cost of public safety versus the property taxes, and then we divide the two, and you see that in 2009, we spent more than 100% of our property tax revenue on public safety, and as we forecast into the next couple years, or the current budget year in the next 3 years, we're exceeding 100% of our total property taxes spending on public safety. Now, this is basically the same thing shown in terms of the millage itself. The net cost of providing those public safety services here is represented as a millage rate, and next to it you have the general millage rate, and in the years ahead it would take a 31% increase in that rate. We'd have to get up to 19 mills to continue providing the current level of public safety services that we have today. So the primary benefit of the public safety millage is that the council could ask the voters to approve more than the 5.5 mills provided by a Headley override. Now, the following calculations in this presentation are to illustrate what would be the millage rate required to balance the budget and maintain current services for the next 3 years without reducing personnel, without concessions, or any of those other things we just touched on a moment ago. It's basically maintaining the status quo for the next 3 years, increasing our costs at 3.5% over the next 3 years. Now, under the best case scenario, where values are not declining as rapidly as the county has forecasted, we'd have to levy an additional 10 mills to support our current public safety spending over the course of the next 3 years, and that would increase the total tax rate by about 21%. This is what that does to the average tax bill. As I touched on earlier, the blue line shows where the average tax bill has actually been, and under this scenario, we've caught back up to that 2009 peak in 2014. So basically, the average tax bill would go back to where it was 2 years ago. Under the worst case scenario, have to increase the millage, the total tax rate, and that total tax rate, that's schools, city, county, zoo, that's every taxing jurisdiction. That's and only half of that money stays here in the city, half of it goes to other places. But when you pay that tax bill, that total tax rate on there is about 49 mills, and so increasing the public safety millage by 19 mills would increase that total tax rate and that total tax bill by 39%. Now, 39% sounds like a lot, and it is, but even when you increase the average tax bill by 39%, it's still not going to be much more than it was in fiscal year ending 2009. That average tax bill was about $2,500, and under this worst-case scenario, in 2014, it'll be about $2,600.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
You have several different millage rates, 2 slides back, or either of the 2 slides back, where you lay out, sure, that works right there. Public safety millage 3.907, 7.28, and 10.3. But the number that you used was 10. So what you're saying is that if we wanted to go for a public safety millage, we should project out to the best of our ability what the costs will be over the next several years, and then select a millage rate that hits the top point?
Yeah, what you would have to ask the voters to do would be to approve a 10, this is 10.3321, let's call it 10 mils. You have to ask the voters to approve 10 mils. You wouldn't have to levy all 10 immediately. You could levy.
What do you do with our debt service millage?
Well, the debt service millage rate varies, but it varies for a different reason.
Okay.
But you would have to ask the voters to approve 10 mils and then only levy 3.9 in the first year, 7.2 in the second year, and then get up to 10. You wouldn't want to get into a situation, I don't think, where you're going back to the voters every year asking for another increase.
That was where my question was going.
Bob, I thought you said our total millage right now is 49 mils.
Yeah.
Well, then, why wouldn't, in the best-case scenario, those 3.9 be added to 49? Why wouldn't it be 53 then?
Oh, it would be. If you added those two together, that...
Add those two together.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
What this is trying to show is how much of an increase on the total tax rate would be. And in this chart, I've made some assumptions about what's going to happen to the total tax rate here, because it is going to go up because our debt service millage is going to go up as values go down. So rather than just using today's rate and calling that the rate for the next 3 years, I've actually increased it a little bit.
So just so I understand, this total tax rate is exclusive of any public safety millage on these slides. And so the total tax obligation would be in FY 2014, 68 mils.
That's correct.
Or so.
Yeah. Yeah. What this is trying to show is what the public safety millage would be, the millage required to maintain the status quo. The total tax rate is what will happen without a millage increase, and then that percent change shows how much that public safety millage would increase that total tax rate and that total tax bill. So conclusions, with the Headley override, either under the best case scenario, the city would have to reduce expenditures by 5% to balance the budget. Under the worst case scenario, we'd have to reduce expenditures by 20% to balance the budget. Either way, it doesn't allow the city to maintain current services, but would allow the city to continue to restructure itself at a more reasonable pace than we would without it. The average principal residence tax bill would likely increase in the first year if a Headley override was approved, but then in 2012 and 2013 it would decrease again because values would be decreasing more and the millage rate would be staying the same. The council could employ this as a short-term measure. One of the things that's being discussed is the establishment and the incorporation of a fire authority with Hazel Park. If that happens, the council will need to ask the voters to approve a fire authority millage. So we've talked about how if we increase the rate today, how might we decrease it in the future, and so one way to look at a Headley override is a very short-term kind of one-year fix, and then hope that the fire authority millage is there to kick in the second year. But if it's not, then we're kind of back to square one. So it's kind of a big gamble.
Mm-hmm.
Public safety millage, the voters would have to increase the millage rate by basically between 10 and 20 mils in order to balance the budget and maintain current services for the next 3 years. The average principal residence tax bill would increase in each of those 3 years, but it wouldn't match its peak of 2009 or its 2008 peak until 2012. Now, this is all 3 of those options put together on the same chart, so you can see them together. Here you've got the best case and worst case public safety scenario in light blue and purple, both heading up after approval, and then the green line is the Headley override. It goes up for 1 year and then basically levels off, goes down slightly. So under the best case scenario, the city could levy additional mills in the next 3 years without increasing the average principal residence tax bill, because as values go down, the rate can go up to net the same amount of money. So over the course of the next 3 years, you get a maximum millage increase of 3.8 mills, and that would basically hold the average taxpayer harmless, and that their property tax bill would be flat over the next 3 years. The worst case scenario could levy an additional 9.6688 mills in 2013 without actually increasing that average bill. So that gives us a range of between 3.8 and 9.6 over the next 3 years. That wouldn't actually increase the average tax bill. It would just have it remain flat over the next 3 years. But there's probably not a lot of folks that pay the average tax bill. There's going to be many that are paid more than average, like myself, and many that pay less than the average. So there's going to be some people that benefit more than others, any way you slice it.
And Bob, on the best case and worst case scenarios refer to property valuations.
Correct. Yeah, the best case scenario is where the taxable values are declining at half of the county forecast, and then the worst case scenario is where property values, taxable values specifically, are declining at the county forecast.
There is a little bit of good news in some of the future I don't know that word, future scenario. The Detroit metropolitan area is expected to be one of the top 5 cities in the next few years in appreciation or slowing of the depreciation of homes. So just saw that online the other day. So I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be a tough 3 or 4 years, but I think we're going to see property values bottom out and begin to rise in the next couple of years soon. And all of these scenarios, again, do not include further cost efficiencies that council can find, further reductions in costs, and most important, concessions from the unions. We've gotten some concessions, I'm understanding, from the clerical and technical workers and the court workers.
Yep, and the police command officers as well.
Police command, so there's just, what, 3 more unions left?
4.
There's 4 more unions left, and eventually there'll have to be changes like everyone else is making, and then that will soften the blow and allow us to either, well, it'll allow us to raise taxes less.
Mm-hmm.
And then a fire authority, if that's successful in 1.5 years or 2 years, would further enable us to spin that off and recoup those costs and keep the city functioning at a good level of services.
Mm-hmm.
Are there questions from the council table? Are you pretty well
I'm almost done. The next step is for council to start to narrow down these options. Obviously, there's a lot here to consider. Next steps specifically are to receive feedback from council tonight, determine which options you'd like staff to investigate further. One of the things that I've asked you to act on tonight would be to establish a committee of community members to look at these options and to provide recommendations to the council regarding these financial challenges. You've seen these kind of committees appointed in places like Huntington Woods and Ypsilanti in the past, and very recently the city of Northville has established one. The city of Lathrop Village went through this process about a year ago prior to asking their voters for a Headley override as well. And then the next step is then to adopt a ballot question by resolution. It has to be approved by the state and then submitted to the county and then eventually submitted to the voters. The schedule, if the council is ready and willing to begin the process of establishing a committee, I think we could have it appointed on September 13th. If we establish it by resolution at the next meeting on August 29th, start getting the word out there tonight that this is happening, the appointments could be made on the 13th. And then it would be a pretty aggressive turnaround time to get the committee to report back to the council by November, but that is the deadline to adopt a ballot question and put it on for the February election. And then the fallback position would be February is the deadline for the May election. So it's a pretty aggressive, pretty tight timeline either way. But if anybody has any questions on any of that, I'd be happy to.
And if you miss a deadline and there's another election, I mean, there's one, we could have an election in February, we could have one in May, we could have one in...
The next election after that is August. The February or May are the last chance to approve a millage in order to...
This fiscal year.
To levy it in the next fiscal year, correct.
Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Patrick Sheehan, Ferndale Firefighters Association. Hey, through the chair, I just wanted to ask a question of Mr. Bruner. I'm dizzy from looking at all the charts. I just had one question. You're using words like to maintain status quo. What exactly are you including in that from the fire end? I mean, we've lost 7 positions in the labor union. What is status quo numbers for?
The number of employees we have today.
Currently?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dennis Augustin, 1550 Spencer. City Manager, what are we talking in terms of property values now? How is that going to bring it up to justify paying these extra taxes through millage? I mean, I'd like to see my property values come up before I could say, okay, let's make the city government run more efficiently with extra money.
I'd like to see your property values go up too, but that's the problem.
Well, that is a problem because my property values have gone down and you're asking me to come pay some more money.
Let me try to answer your question, because you weren't here on July 12th when we went over the long-term financial plan and the financial forecast, okay?
I watched it on television, though, so I guess I was in my living room.
Well, then you should know that we're looking...
I would like to see my property values come up to justify voting for something that's going to take care of the city. When the city turned around and screwed us, they took away our police, our fire, and our DPW. Basically, we took away our city services, okay, and everything pertains that you guys will put your hand in there because it's called the general fund. Okay?
This is a time to ask questions. We're not debating any particular issue.
I got to debate it. We're talking property values. You want me to vote in favor of you guys for this millage. And right now, I can't justify it.
We're not debating, asking
well,
anybody
to come up, right, Mayor? It will come up on an election ballot.
It may. That's what we're talking about.
Well, you got, I tell you what, bring everybody's property values up to justify paying more taxes, to pay more money out of my pocket, which incidentally, I'm just like you and a lot of other people. I don't have the money to pay it. Okay? You sit here and you talk about running this government with money. You need money to run it. Okay? This government is like my household. And my household ain't running very good right now because we've all took a hit in there.
Which is why we had to lay off police and fire and DPW.
You know.
You understand that, right?
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
But we got to straighten out some language here so we can get some people convinced to start bringing back these property values.
Right. Well, nobody.
And let's get some jobs rolling here. But I mean, we're not going to solve the issue by getting rid of people.
Mr. Augustin, I think
I'm looking at it this way.
The issue is no one in this room can control property values.
Well, then don't ask me to vote for something, and all I'm seeing up there is a tax increase.
That's the democracy. That's what all the voters will get to decide. But then you can't say, well, don't lay off any police, fire, or DPW. We can't print money in the basement. It's your tax dollars that pay for the police officer.
That's right. And I got very few dollars right now left in that, but we got to turn around and we got to start looking at the reality of things, and that is property values got to come up.
Right.
Okay.
We're in agreement.
So
all right.
Let's talk. Why don't you talk about that a little more? Why don't you come up with some ideas like that for everybody? You know,
like I
mean,
said,
I sit in my living room and I watch you guys. You tell me when I'm not here and when I'm here. Okay, fine. But I'll tell you where I'm at when I'm not here, and that's watching you guys on television.
Okay, we're glad you watch.
You know.
Other questions from the table with regards to the presentation? All right, and again, we are in just a discussion phase as far as the presentation goes. Mr. Bruner, before we hear from more folks, there's nothing on the agenda other than you want to get a flavor for where we're at as far as direction?
Correct. Tonight is the opportunity for you to receive more information based on your questions from last meeting, provide staff with further direction on what more information you want, but the only action at this point is to direct me to begin the process of
to see if there's any consensus on any of these particular ideas of which route to go, including the concept, but we're not voting, but the concept of a blue ribbon panel and which direction. All right. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thomas Gagne, 360 West Woodland. A couple questions for the city manager, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor. You said the costs are increasing 3.5% a year, and that is due to?
In large part, the cost of health care, which has gone up by about 10% a year over the last 10 years, but the city has cut other costs to offset that.
And you expect in the next few years that cost-cutting and adjustments for health care will average out to about 3.5%?
Right. 3.5% represents the city expenditure trend line over the last 10 years. So there is some cost-cutting built into that to keep it at just 3.5%.
Okay.
But the major driver of that is the cost of health care.
In your experience or in the experience of other of your colleagues in other cities, what protection might residents be given if we increase the millage rate, as drastically as we might, that as property values recover, that we end up paying way more in property taxes than we did in 2007, 2008, or 2009?
Well, Proposal A would actually take care of that for you, because as property taxes recover and start to go up at a rate of more than inflation, then the millage rate would be driven back down by Headley rollbacks. So I guess
Headley rollbacks takes care of that.
Yeah.
Do you have any numbers that suggest how Proposal A actually affects the distribution of those increased millages on the residents? You mentioned before that people who purchased their houses. You didn't complete your sentence.
Yeah.
Can you finish that thought?
I don't have what we could do is we could come up with a chart that instead of showing the average tax bill shows, how the average home that was uncapped in X year versus the average tax bill of a home that's been capped since 1995. There's my column this month in Ferndale Friends is about Proposal A and about the fact that the taxable value of my house was uncapped in 2003, so I pay more in property taxes than my next two neighbors combined.
Right.
So it's a difficult issue for most folks to understand because most folks just look at their tax bill, and the person next door could be paying twice as much or half as much.
Are you aware of any cities that are considering any kind of constitutional amendment or proposition requesting some modification to the Proposal A?
Well, the Michigan Municipal League has been pushing on that issue for since 2002 that I'm aware of. There's been several reports and studies that have been done about Proposal A and Headley and what they've done to the cities. The governor had appointed a task force on local government finance. They identified basically all the solutions, but there's been no political will in Lansing to implement any of them.
Okay.
Maybe we could help, since Ferndale always seemed to try to spearhead things, maybe we could spearhead another effort through the Suburbs Alliance.
And we've already passed some resolutions relative to that, I believe, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should continue to lobby Lansing, but if anybody thinks that Lansing's going to solve our problems, then...
Well, they won't solve them, but it couldn't hurt to try, and we're going to get a whole lot new senators and new governor.
That's part of the problem, too, though, is all
I
those
understand.
new
Novices.
state elected officials.
Did you have any other questions?
Well, lastly, I don't have all the memos in front of me. You had included some examples of the committee formation instructions from a couple different cities. I think one of them was interesting. It was Ypsilanti's. The date on that, can you confirm, was that 2005?
I think it might have been 04.
2004.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that Ypsilanti saw this coming, as many people did back in 2004 and 2005, and got this under control, or started this. Do you know what happened to them since then? Was it passed? Have they...
Well, I was the assistant city manager from 2004 to 2007 prior to becoming city manager here. And it wasn't that they saw...
We didn't arrange that for anyone watching this. We didn't arrange that lead on this.
So I had a front row seat to what happened in Ypsilanti. The problems in Ypsilanti were not the current real estate market collapse. The problem in Ypsilanti is that it has nearly the same population as Ferndale, nearly the same land area as Ferndale, and about 3/4 of the tax base, because Eastern Michigan University doesn't pay property taxes. There's a lot of tax-exempt property in Ypsilanti. So they were really one of the first communities to feel the distress, just under what Proposal A and Headley was doing to them.
They were the canary in the mine shaft in that one.
Yeah.
How has that turned out for them?
Well, they're still in business. There was rather than the property tax rate there is already very high because the taxable value is so low. So rather than asking the voters to increase the tax rate, there was an income tax election in Ypsilanti. Now, income tax may be attractive to a place like Ypsilanti that has a major employer and a lot of people coming in from the outside every day. That failed, but regardless of its success or failure, it's probably not an attractive option for Ferndale.
All right. Councilman Galloway, you have a question?
Bob, when it's mentioned that we didn't foresee this coming, when was Ferndale's Fiscal Advisory Committee instituted, and when did it disband?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I researched the issue last week, and the first Fiscal Review Committee, I forgot exactly what it was titled, dates back to like the 70s. And then there was a new one most recently, which I think was appointed in 02 or 03 and was wrapping up its work in 04 when I became city manager.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. And I believe the Metropolitan Detroit residential real estate market peaked in value in December of 2005, so it was going up until that point. Do you recall hearing any reports in 2001 or 2002 that we were going to see utter collapse in housing values? Was anybody predicting that you're aware of?
No, I mean, in 01 and 02, the real big issue at that time was state revenue sharing, because that was starting to be cut, and property tax was still going up by inflation plus whatever development was happening. So property taxes have been a relatively stable source of revenue over the years, and it wasn't until the recent global economic collapse and the collapse of our real estate market that it became an issue. And now you see a lot of communities are asking voters for millage increases as a result.
And in fact, after the property value started to decrease, Ferndale's tax revenues related to property taxes continue to rise for another year or two. Is that correct?
That's correct, because the assessments lag the market.
There's a delay.
And the taxes lag assessments, so there's kind of delayed reaction, which is why you see, what's going on in the private sector with the big three, and a lot of other companies, private sector organizations have already been through this restructuring and so forth, and the public sector's been a little late catching up.
And the Financial Advisory Committee that we had was comprised of a lot of finance people, wasn't it? I mean, we had representatives of major financial institutions, large corporations. We brought in, I think they brought in a consultant at almost pro bono fees to review the city budget, and none of those people suggested that, we could expect what was coming down the road.
No, its review basically consisted of how efficiently was the city operating, was there any cost-cutting measures, basically is the city of Ferndale operating consistent with what other cities are operating and how much money we spend per capita and so forth. And its review found that basically the city is run very efficiently. So the crisis that faces us now is not a crisis of efficiency, but just that revenues are decreasing more rapidly than efficiency could ever offset.
Our Michigan's recession began shortly after 9/11, and so the state's had its recession going on for 9 years. But it was under Mayor Porter that we first created that financial advisory committee, and our costs were rising, and we had a fairly substantial number of employees. I think tonight, among other things, there is a possible motion to approve the creation of a blue ribbon type citizens panel. You also are looking for some direction or thoughts from council members. I'll start by sharing my general thought that if I have to pick which way to go to the voters for any kind of an increase, and I haven't made a decision yet or come down on either side, but I lean towards a general millage as opposed to the special public safety millage, which would require a charter review as well. I'm very excited and hopeful that the fire authority consolidation can work, because that will not only help us, but help save Hazel Park, our neighbor, and would strongly support the creation of a blue ribbon panel, especially if it were inclusive of all segments of our community, including the business community, the religious community, voters, residents, safety personnel, conservatives, liberals, so that it truly can represent the city and then come up with its recommendation to us as to how to go forward. So that's where I would come from. Do other council members want to weigh in?
I share the same views. I think, I don't know how large we want to make that committee, but it seems as though a good spot to start might be that Citizen Financial Review Committee, see if those, a lot of those folks still live in the community.
Tom King, I think, was one of those folks involved with that.
Yeah, there's a half dozen people who are still around that I know have voiced some interest in getting involved in this again. Maybe we could double the size of it or triple the size of it, but invite those people back and set them up with a room and budget for pizza and salad. And
Mr. Bruner's offered to be the staff liaison. I suspect if we were lucky enough to get former Mayor Porter to be on that, nobody knows more about this than he does. Maybe even former Mayor Geddert might sit on this committee. Councilwoman Piano, any thoughts?
I favor a general millage as well, knowing that a fire authority, I have full faith in everybody to make that happen, and that we will have to go back to the residents for a fire authority millage. And so to me that puts me over into the general millage category. But I do welcome the public input that we're going to collect through this committee. I think that's important, and I want people to know that this committee is planned or suggested by the city manager, and we were going to do a poll, and this is something else that we're going to try, and I have high hopes that it will turn in how the residents truly feel about the millage increases, because we are at a turning point with the city's finances, and we need a solution. So I really support this.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker, any thoughts? Which direction are you leaning towards?
You and I are largely on the same page, Mayor, and my reason is similar to Melanie's for my interest in a Headley override as a first step. I would then hope to be able to essentially take the fire department out of the general fund budget and set it up with its own dedicated millage supported budget. But I've also heard from residents over the last year about a number of things. We often hear at the podium here, people expressing one opinion, maybe, don't cut any police officers, don't cut any police officers. It's not necessarily what I hear outside of this room, though. I think that there is a vocal group that supports public safety exclusively, I don't, however, feel that that is necessarily representative of the entire community. The Headley override would allow us to absolutely support public safety. They are the largest expenditure that we make out of our general fund, but we would not have to sacrifice any of that balance that makes Ferndale a great place to live.
And then on the blue, you're in favor of a blue ribbon committee
Absolutely.
to advise us and take testimony and help come up with.
I saw Tom King on election night, and I should have asked him then if he wanted to be on it.
Councilman?
Well, I'm kind of sitting on the fence right now, but leaning towards the general millage slightly. However, I would like to hear more from the Blue Ribbon Committee, who in turn would hear more from the residents, more broader group than just a certain few, where they lie. And we obviously work for the residents, so I want to hear what they say. Okay. That's where I'm standing right now.
Again, for the voters or the residents watching, we're not making any decisions as to whether to put a millage on yet or not, but we're moving in that direction to consider it. That's when the voters get to choose, because we don't. We don't raise taxes at this table. We give it to the residents to vote, and that's when people can make a decision. And when you talk about we don't want to close the Kulig Center, or we don't want to lay off any policemen, or we don't want to cut fire, this is where you get to vote to decide, you know, if you want to go this route or how we're going to move forward. Does this help, Mr. Brunner? And do you need a motion in terms of moving forward, or do you have consensus tonight?
It's not an absolute necessity, but if you want to make it official.
I like to read this.
Councilman?
I move to direct the city manager to prepare a resolution to establish a committee of community members to review the city's long-term financial plan and provide recommendations for achieving and maintaining financial sustainability.
There's a motion and a second. Lennon Baker to form a Blue Ribbon Committee. I see our first volunteer to sit on that committee, Mr. Gagne.
Now's the time for comments and discussion.
Oh, I thought you were volunteering to sit on the committee.
I certainly would.
Because this is a tough decision, and we have to balance taxes versus what people can pay versus how much it costs to have a firefighter or a police officer.
It'd be a privilege to serve in that committee if the council asked me.
We didn't set a process yet. I'm going to suggest that the city manager come up with a process. He listed a time frame of September when we would form this thing, so it gives us 6 weeks or so.
Right.
And folks could volunteer. And then, again, my interest is balanced so that there is a business owner or two, there's a DDA person, there's a member of the gay community, there's a resident, there's a senior citizen, there's a minister. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to make a quick clarification. It was asked whether or not anyone saw this coming, and some people thought that no one hadn't. I just want to remind everybody that back in the 80s, how many of you remember the savings and loan scandal, when people kept appraising business property higher and higher and higher until someone said, that building's only 20% occupied, why would I buy it? And that whole thing collapsed in Texas, brought in the Keating Five and that whole bit. You may also remember then in the late 90s, I'm sure the phrase irrational exuberance should remind some of you that Alan Greenspan saw that prices in the stock market had inflated irrationally. After that fell in 2000, it was in 2001, 2002, that many bankers in the real estate market, and perhaps it's because I was working at a bank at the time, had already seen that the housing values had started skyrocketing and it was unsupported properly. It wasn't growing at a steady pace as it should. And even in the 2007 mayoral campaign, when you and I were running, you were making the point, as was politically popular back then, that, hey, Ferndale's housing prices have appreciated more than our surrounding communities. Isn't that great, great, great? And I made perhaps the unpopular observation that what that means is that Ferndale will be one of the hardest hit communities when the housing bubble bursts, as everyone was predicting it would since at least 2005. And then it finally did, and it caught up with us in 2009, as our city manager pointed out for us. So just as a point of clarification, it was seen ahead of time. There was an opportunity to start preparing for it, and I will accept that offer. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not my place to offer it, but we appreciate your support, and I'm glad you were able to see the future. And maybe you can let us know what the next big crash will be so that I can, get out of that market. And let us know what will happen in 2013.
The housing market had, of course, already popped in 2007, 2 years ago, so I'm not sure that's foresight.
I think actually we began making cuts, as you recall, Councilman and Mayor Porter, back in the mid-00s, early 00s, we began trimming and cutting and making changes to health care. So we actually are in better shape than most of the surrounding cities. Yes, sir.
I'll keep my discussion to the motion at hand here. I'm here to encourage council to do so. The first thing I was actually involved with in the city was the Fiscal Responsibility Committee. The city of Ferndale actually had less in the bank than we do today. The circumstances were not quite as dramatic as they are now. But what the committee did was it reviewed the operations of the city, looking for ways to make the city more efficient in the way it delivered services, to see if there was some way to take the burden away from the people, and also what was reality on the tax base moving forward in the future. With the diversity on the committee, I think they understood what the city's needs were, as well as what the people living in the city was feasible for them. So I would encourage you to appoint a committee, make it a diverse committee, so they have a full understanding of how this will affect the people of our community.
Mayor, didn't you also chair or co-chair the mid-90s Blue Ribbon Committee that got the voters to accept the bond issue to repair the sewers and the sidewalks and the roads?
Citizens Maine Committee, yes.
Citizens Maine, which had failed a couple of times, and then y'all came along and formed a grassroots, diverse, inclusive Blue Ribbon Committee that demonstrated the need to repair the roads and fix the water mains, and it passed.
I think the advantage to that committee, again, was there could have been more money spent, but the committee reviewed what was essential to the community and affordable to the average individual's pocketbook. In turn, that investment is what helped bring investment back into the city and started to increase property values and so forth, a reinvestment in our government itself. There was a question earlier tonight about do something for my property values. Making your city efficient in the way they operate and the fact that they can pay the bills so that we don't have to make more dramatic cuts is something that will stabilize the community and in turn increase property values, which again will help offset those things in the future. That's what we have to look for.
Good point. Very well. I think we have direction then. Mr. Bruner, there's a motion to create that panel. Madam Clerk?
On the motion to create the Blue Ribbon panel, Council Members Lennon?
Yes.
Fiona?
Yes.
Baker? Yes. Galloway?
Yes.
Mayor Covey?
Yes, so you'll come forward with some process. Next item, Madam Clerk.
We are now to regular agenda item B, consideration of a charter amendment ballot question regarding supervision of divisions.
Sure. Is this Mr. Christ or Mr. Bruner?
I'll be happy to address
Thank
that,
you,
Your
Dan.
Honor. You'll recall at the last council meeting, council elected to rescind ordinance 1094, and subsequent to that, requested that a proposed resolution be prepared which would present the question of a charter amendment to the voters this November with respect to the organization of the divisions and department of the city. A proposed resolution for council's consideration addressing that issue has been prepared. It's been provided to the Assistant Attorney General, who's responsible for charter amendment language as to the statement of purpose. Should council elect to adopt this resolution, it would be resubmitted to the Attorney General as well as to the Governor for approval of the Attorney General and the Governor prior to presentation to the voters this coming November.
Okay. Questions? Councilman, you're good? Any questions from the table?
I was just wondering, how similar is the proposed language to other cities that have this type of setup already?
Well,
form of government.
Form of government, yes.
It's very similar. I mean, there are not very many communities that have the specific breakdown with respect to the division of departments and divisions that the city of Ferndale has. But the charter with respect to a city manager form of government, it's very typical. And the draft language of the proposed resolution would provide, and I guess if council wishes, I can read how the proposed language would read, would be that the Division of Safety and Division of Law and Records shall be under the supervision and direction and control of council. The proposed, that's how it is currently. The proposed language would be that all divisions and departments of the city shall be under the supervision, direction, and control of the city manager.
So it's very simple language, very cut and dried. Thank you for the question. And again, this would be on the ballot. Are we in plenty of time then to have this okayed by the Attorney General and others that need to get it on the ballot for November?
There's still sufficient time. It is
not plenty of time.
Not plenty of time.
So we need to move quickly. Any discussion?
I have one more question. Number 3, the proposed charter amendment shall be submitted to the electors in the following form. Shall the City of Ferndale Charter, Chapter 3, Section 12 be amended to so provide? Is that typical ballot language?
Yes.
Okay. I don't remember.
It's typical charter amendment language.
Oh, okay. Because when I voted for the primaries and for the millages that were on there for the Oakland County parks, I don't remember it being worded this way.
Well, it's not a
This
change
is
to the
typical
charter.
charter amendment language consistent with the requirements of the Home Rule Cities Act regarding amendments to the charter.
Okay. Thanks for explaining the difference.
And do we need a 2/3 vote of council to do that? I only say that because Bob mentioned a 2/3 vote for police and public safety millage. I heard you say that, Bob.
I'll take a look at that.
Anyway, I think you'll have it. I don't mean to make you hustle there. Further questions? If not, Madam Clerk, we don't have a motion. I need a motion.
I had a question about exactly how we
Go for it.
make the motion. Dan, is it sufficient to make a motion
to adopt a resolution?
To adopt the resolution as laid out in your letter of July 28, 2010? Or do you want me to read the whole thing?
No, it's unnecessary to read the resolution, but it's the revised language that's set forth in my August 5th, 2010 correspondence would be appropriate.
Thank you. I would move to adopt the charter amendment language as laid out in the City Attorney's August 5th, 2010 correspondence.
Support.
Motion made by Baker, seconded by Piana. Discussion? Again, I think this is good. We're putting this vote to the people. They will have the ultimate decision. Madam Clerk?
Council members Piana?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
And Mayor Covey?
Yes, passes unanimously. Last item on the regular agenda, Madam Clerk?
Would be consideration of noise ordinance amendments.
Okay, and I did mention that there's actually no consideration of any particular amendments tonight. This is further discussion. Mr. Bruner?
That's correct, Your Honor. Chief Collins has put together a report on our enforcement to date, and so tonight we're looking to get a little feedback and direction from the council. The city attorney can then advise you as to what options he can bring back for future consideration.
Hi, Chief.
Good evening, Your Honor. Would you like a brief overview for the folks at home and in the audience?
For the folks at home and in the audience and us, a report in its brevity, but it's succinct, sure.
I will try to be as brief as possible, but as you know, it's not one of my fortes. As you know, back in 2001, the city was experiencing sound violations or complaints, rather, particularly from what was then Club Karma, what is now Boogie Fever, and also what was then Club Cobalt, what is now Eden. The response to that difficulty was that we did a study along with the mayor, Mr. Christ, and myself, and members of the DDA, and we, through legal research from the city attorney and some research through what noise is and how it works, we came up with the existing noise ordinance, which was passed in May in 2002. Subsequent enforcement and discussions with the owners of those businesses that I talked about earlier resulted in compliance through both soundproofing of those businesses as well as compliance by turning some of the music down, keeping the doors closed, things of that nature. What we have different than what is different now is that we were dealing with businesses that were encased inside of a business. It was not an open air kind of an environment. It was all the sound emanating through a closed business, although there were instances where doors were open and we were receiving complaints when that happened. Of late, we have begun to experience different types of noise or complaints in the area of West 9 Mile and the Troy area, emanating from Rosie's, from Villanova, and also from Club 9. The difference then to now, of course, is that we have outside entertainment. We have speaker systems outside. We also have businesses that are built with open air kind of, even the inside noise is open to the outside. We have been responding to these type of complaints. My summary shows the number of violations that we have written in the past year, almost to date. There's approximately 24 of those. None of those were in the central business district as in relationship to the actual bars downtown. There was a couple in the central business district, but they were not related to the bar music, absent of 2 recent ones at Club 9. We did respond, however, to many calls for services to that area. On the one item that I supplied, you'll see that I have them broken down into areas of the city that you can pretty much figure out which bars or which areas are being responded to. There was a total of 88 calls for services in the last year for noise complaints in the area of South 9 Mile and Woodward Avenue, north of 9 Mile and west of Woodward, south of 9 Mile, east of Woodward, north of 9 Mile, east of Woodward, and Woodward Avenue and north of 9 Mile.
88 in the calendar year or in the last 12 months?
In the last 12 months, year to date. Okay. And lastly, I did supply the NetRMS logs that shows all of the unfortunate part is that the computer system calls everything disorderly conduct, but then if you look through you have to manually go through to find the ones that are the noise complaints, and I checked off the ones that are related to the downtown areas that you could reasonably assume are the licensed establishment. But in short, we believe that some review of the noise ordinance may be appropriate. We believe that the bringing in the business owners to make some type of accommodations to their soundproofing, if at all possible, and also toning down or eliminating possibly the exterior entertainment and sound systems may alleviate some of these problems.
Chief, your last statement was either, did you say calming down or reducing or ending outdoor music? What was your last statement?
Yes, I believe that either elimination of entertainment on the exterior of the building or at least the drastic reduction in noise from, I mean, that would be a compliance thing from the business owners as of right now. Inclusive of the weekend, even Sunday, as late as Sunday, we had 3 complaints. They did not. They were close, but they did not go over the stated levels on the ordinance.
Yeah, Sunday afternoon, Sunday early evening.
There was 3 of them Sunday. You don't have this information. I compiled this today.
I suspect it was early evening. I heard it too.
We had one at 7:40, one at 7:04, and one earlier in the afternoon at 3:47. 2 of them would have been after the sound requirements are lessened. They have, in fact, you can't. The decibel levels go down after 7 p.m. that they're allowed to exceed, and the one earlier in the afternoon was at the higher levels.
I thought it was 10 p.m. is when the lower level kicked in.
No, that's in the, well, there's a bit of the city attorney and I have been discussing this. The way the ordinance reads is that it's residential mixed And that's one level, that's one set levels, and then there's commercial, which is another level.
Right.
Some of them are exactly the same,
Right.
but one of them is different. And the discussion is that where do you take the reading from? We have been taking the reading from the residential and using the residential, and the times for that is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But there is in the commercial zone, it's 7 to 10.
Gotcha. Numbers reduce at 10. All right. I think I had another question, but I forgot. Council members, any, before the chief is done for the moment, questions for him? Yes.
Yeah, I thought the downtown central business district was zoned as mixed use.
No, it's zoned as CBD.
As CBD?
It's on zone.
So is that different than commercial then? Or
Well,
is that,
it's-
is this the, goes back to your continued conversation?
Kind of semantics. It's where our zoning doesn't necessarily match up with our.
Or sound ordinance, okay.
I guess I have a question, that is, Chief, we have an ordinance that has levels, numbers, that can be read by the machine. And so even if there's an outdoor patio versus a bar that doesn't have an outdoor patio, they still cannot exceed that sound level, and they'll either break that level or they won't break the level. So
That's absolutely correct.
I mean, I understand that it is different if you have speakers outdoors or you have an outdoor patio and there's music blasting. And I wonder, we might have to bring that sound guy that was at the meeting, a very knowledgeable person, might be able to help us craft something with regards to the outdoor stuff.
Interestingly, I had that exact conversation with the gentleman after the meeting, and my position was, and although he didn't quite agree with it, but because he said it doesn't matter if the noise is inside or outside, noise is noise. And
right.
My argument to that was that, well, the closer that noise is to the neighborhood, it's still going to be amplified just because of the distance that is closer to the, and the fact that there's no walls that separate the noise source to the neighborhood. So,
but yet that machine that reads sound doesn't know whether...
That's absolutely true. I
So-
agree. It's just that as a practical matter, the closer the sound source is to the neighborhood, the more you would have to turn the sound source down in order to comply with the ordinance.
And my last question, Chief, is in terms of the process, how we might want to consider amending the noise ordinance, would you see that as coming from a council committee or the ordinance committee of council, or a combination of staff recommendations?
That, as well as if there is to be a reduction, I would believe that we would have to retake sound measurements and things of that nature.
If I could, on that issue, I mean, the option for council back when the ordinance was first considered was to hire an expert to conduct that study, or the approach that was adopted was to have the ordinance committee undertake a comprehensive study. Mayor, you'll recall going out at night in various locations for various times during the night to establish a threshold. There would need to be an objective determination should council wish to undertake revision of the specific numbers that are asserted in the ordinance to justify and legitimize whatever level council should come up with. That's what the initial study was done by the ordinance committee. It can be done two ways. You can do a committee, or you can have an expert that can weigh in and provide that guidance.
Well, but the process could be that it came via the ordinance committee, or a staff-led process that could still hire an expert.
That's correct.
And I do recall, and just so, Councilman Galloway was a part of that too. We were on the
you were
ordinance
on that
committee
too, right?
together. Yes, we were both new sort of back then, but stood outside of Boogie Fever and then Karma and measured, and down by Club Cobalt. I again would want input, if we go that route, from the police department, from the business community, just so that it's representative, as well as the neighbors, so that we can get all sides and try to craft the best route to go. Councilwoman?
I have a question for the mayor or Melanie or the chief. There was or even from Chris, I see Chris in the audience from the DDA, there was a meeting that was held at Rosie O'Grady's, and I attended briefly, but when three of us are in a room, sometimes people get concerned that we're violating Open Meetings Act, so I excused myself when the mayor attended, as he and Melanie stayed, and I wondered if any of the the four of you that are here tonight. I also know that Sherry was there. There were several people in the audience that were there. Could maybe talk a little bit about some of the flaws in our ordinance that the sound expert talked about. I caught just a very little bit of it after the meeting in some wrap-ups that I heard. It seems that perhaps the ways that we've been trying to measure sound might not be the best ways to measure sound. I mean, regardless of the volume at which the sound comes through. Do we have the right equipment? Are we measuring over the right periods of time? Are we measuring from the right places? What did the sound expert have to say about that?
Our sound expert has a name. His name is Dieter Geis, and he has done work for the Detroit Zoo and the city of Dearborn, and he also worked for Ford Motor Company. He was a sound expert to reducing the sound in cars. And when he retired, he became a sound expert. He noted that our noise ordinance is pretty good, and that is very similar to other municipalities, though the biggest ambiguity is a section in the ordinance, hang on, I'm looking for it, is the maximum permissible sound level, section 2100, in the Code of Ordinances, and it's something I won't dive into here because it's wordy, but it is something that he said that we should reduce or make more clear as part of the ordinance revision. He also suggested that our ordinance focuses on the more technical side. The dBA decibels is the way that our ear hears sounds, and then there are some other decibel levels that he said that were really hard to follow, and they were subjective, even with sound meters. So it is something to look at, and he recommended that the city consider the state of New Jersey's sound ordinance.
This is modeled on that.
Yeah, as a model on that, and I would suggest that we take a look, and I can also call him to get further information and ask the DDA to invite him to come in to present to council as well.
He was an amazing gentleman, and very fair and open, and understands exactly what we're going through, and said he would be available. I don't get the impression that he's overly expensive, and maybe it will be the expert that we want to bring in to advise. But the interesting story that he shared was when the Detroit Zoo did the dinosaur exhibit. Remember, they brought in the Dinosauria.
My kids loves that.
And it turns out that these, they growled and stomped and all of that, which was very cool for the kids and the people who went to see Dinosauria. But the residents in Huntington Woods, after a while, got tired of hearing the roar of dinosaurs.
From 9 to 5.
Yeah, or 9 it was a long time. And they could actually, feel the dinosaurs coming at them and stuff. So that got old, evidently, for a while. But what the solution in that incident was, if I recall, was that rather than making a law or an ordinance, they talked to the folks, and the dinosaur folks turned the volume down and also reduced the hours, if I recall.
They specifically turned down the bass.
The bass. Which is something we need to consider. The bass is what some folks feel.
That is, the dichotomy here is that Councilwoman Piana is correct in that he was concerned about the C weighting that we had placed into the ordinance, whereas that is really where we have most of our complaints, and that is the bass resonant sound that we tried, that we put into that ordinance originally. If you recall back when we had those complaints from the Eden, some of the complaints we were getting from was on the bass on the other side of Woodward Avenue.
It was the bass. It was that their china was shaking in their china cabinets. They didn't hear anything, but they could feel the vibration, and that was solved, at least, it was solved by a combination of
either they're living with it or they don't call the police anymore, because we haven't had for years that problem.
Recall that the bar put some insulation in. And
to the tune of thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars, both bars did.
And Eden is closed a whole lot of the time. I mean, they're almost out of business. So, anything else?
Oh, Councilman.
I mean, we don't get too many complaints, if any, about sound from bars that are entirely enclosed. Or are the number of complaints down in the wintertime?
Yes, but again, Councilman, it's also the complaints themselves. I mean, if you could, I don't want to pick on Como's, but Como's can be very, very loud if you've driven down there on the weekend. But people don't complain about it because they're the farthest from a neighborhood. So you don't get, even though that we feel that they're kind of loud, it doesn't matter unless somebody's disturbed by it. We won't respond to them unless somebody calls. So, but the enclosed bars now, we don't get any calls from Boogie Fever for noise complaints. I mean, I can't remember the last time.
So, to me, that's and we did before we had the sound ordinance, from Karma or Boogie Fever, from what do they call it? Eden, what was the
Club Cobalt.
Temple and we got a lot of complaints from those places before we had the sound ordinance.
Yes.
Which suggests to me that the sound ordinance works for enclosed areas, but not for the outdoor amplification.
Now,
you know, and
I'm
music.
not sure exactly what the Temple / Villanova did, other than maybe stop having that type of music. I don't know if they did soundproofing. They may have. I don't recall. But I do know the other two did extensive soundproofing, and I think that actually made the big difference, was the actual construction changes that they made.
Well, I guess I was sitting on the Plan Commission or Board of Zoning Appeals when the Bosco came in for a special land use permit to put their patio out the back, and we basically told them they couldn't even have acoustic guitar music for fear of neighbors complaining. And as a result, they have a patio that is still a popular place to hang out, and we don't get any complaints. So, I would like to see what we did as far as the Bosco, and my guess is that as long as we have outdoor amplified music, we're going to get complaints regardless of whether it's 75, 65, 85, or 25. I think it needs to be addressed in a different fashion, not relying on decibels, but just saying, if you're going to have an outdoor thing, no amplified music. I just don't think that's the only way to get at it. It's the easiest to police, and I don't think it would detract from these places. And I think it would still allow us, perhaps, if it's crafted properly, to have special events, which is important to me. I think it's important to the people of Ferndale that we still be allowed to have car shows and the occasional concert and Pride and what have you. But I sympathize with the folks who have to go through it on a regular basis, and I just don't think it's needed to have a successful establishment. The Bosco certainly seems to be thriving, and
of course, that is certainly a consideration. We might then have to tell the DDA to turn off their sound as well. We've played music for the last decade outside, and that's maybe an option.
well, maybe that's what we need to do to be consistent. I don't know, but
or,
it just
or maybe it's turned down so low that
Yeah.
it's more like background music and not amplified music.
Right.
It's certainly worth consideration, Councilman. Other questions? Again, I don't think we're looking for a motion, are we? Is the DDA have this on their agenda? Did you say?
They do.
Chris, do you mind coming up? Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your efforts. What is the status of the DDA and its looking at the issue, Chris?
Our report will be given to the board. We have a board meeting this Thursday, and they will be considering everything that went on that special meeting, and all that information will be brought forward to them at that time. And there have been a number of suggestions that have been made, proposed, but nothing has been finalized or
This is
resolved at this point.
A staff-driven report that you're providing?
It was information that was gathered from the meeting and the different input from the different residents and the sound gentleman. And I think she's had some discussions with the police and various other folks.
Okay, so you're presenting that to the board of
the
directors.
board will get that on Thursday.
And the point then is that
For them to decide which direction they might want to take it, if they want to make some modifications or recommend some changes.
That would come to us then?
That would come to you.
All right, so
Okay.
the DDA is working on this as
Yes.
well.
The DDA is very concerned with everybody's happiness.
Appreciate that.
So,
So they have a meeting on Thursday at 9 a.m.
yes, and everyone's welcome to attend at the DDA office, 149 West 9.
What's the pleasure of council?
I think we should refer this to the ordinance committee to come up with some proposals and bring it back to council and talk it out further.
I'd like to see DDA's report, Bill, first, too. I think Scott and I are on the ordinance committee.
Yep. I would think that's a great motion, especially if it includes staff input, which it would, from the city attorney as well as the city manager. And I assume you would also be interested in the DDA report.
Yeah, I mean, it usually takes several weeks, a month to get stuff together, so.
I'm going to ask for those minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Did you, Councilwoman, have something you wanted to add?
Yeah.
We need a second if that's a motion
Second.
to refer to the ordinance
Yes.
committee, along with the other things we said. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
One of the concerns in the DDA meeting was timeliness, and so I encourage the ordinance committee to be timely in giving your recommendations to council. So if you could bring that to no later than the September meeting, I think that would be a month.
First meeting in September?
At the DDA meeting, we mentioned the end of August, so if we have to extend it by 2 other weeks, just so we can get it right and balance all the interests here, because businesses and residents, that would be good.
And you and the DDA both have a way to reach Dieter? Is that his name?
Yes.
Good. Dieter rhymes with meter.
Yes.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. It is. It's the last time, or the right time.
Mark Perrin, 320 West Troy. Through the mayor to the chief, I'd like to know, of the 22 violations listed on this report of yours, how many of them had meter readings from the sound meter? Was the
I don't know the answer. I would guess, though, that most of them none. It'd be probably none, but I don't know the actual answer.
Okay, because I've
These
previously...
are mostly residential.
Okay. Because I'd previously been told that Section 298 of the sound ordinance is not enforceable because it's not quantifiable. And so, and 298 just generally says anything that bugs anybody is a violation. 299 lists specific things that are also not quantifiable, barking dogs, musical instruments. So I guess I don't understand why, when a business is involved, there's got to be a meter. And when there's a resident involved, if you bother somebody, you're going to get a ticket. I don't understand that.
As we've stated at that meeting, Your Honor, is that when we set this standard for the business owners, these were given their marching orders. They were told what was expected of them, and then that's the standard that we hold them to. Now, when we are in a residential zone, it's a different set of circumstances when we write somebody a citation for disturbing the peace. And again, when we say that it's not enforceable, we've never said it's not enforceable. We just say that if someone brings up constitutionality or vagueness, there may be an issue. It doesn't make it not enforceable. It's never been stricken in any way, shape, or form as not enforceable. So typically the officers will use in the neighborhoods 98 or 99 or disorderly disturbing the peace. So there's other ordinances that we may use.
Thank you. I just really think that that's an important clarification to make. I have a house party, I bother a neighbor, I'm going to get a ticket. But we have businesses that are free to bother many people, and the standard to which they're held in violation is harder to reach than for the residents. So
let me just share with you that most of the time, if you're throwing a party and the neighbors complain and the police come, normally you get a warning.
Right,
and they ask you to turn the music down, and usually they do.
But if I come to each one of your houses with my car and my decibel meter and don't violate 65 decibels after 10 o'clock at night, I guarantee every one of you and your neighbors will be calling the police, and I will be given a ticket based off Section 299-4, which says your car can't make noise. So
I
I
hear
think
you.
there's a lot of things that need to be looked at here.
And that's what we're going to do. The ordinance that we created, the sound ordinance, was done and created to protect the neighbors to deal with complaints of sound. So it was actually created to force the businesses to reduce their noise. It appears that, at least in the case of Troy and maybe Saratoga, that that level is not low enough. So it worked at Karma, it worked at Boogie Fever, it worked at Club Cobalt. It's not working now with Club 9 and Rosie's. We're going to try to make it work. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Council. Rich Long, 12-year resident of Ferndale. Live at 262 West Troy, which is right next door to Rosie O'Grady's. Just to piggyback on what you just said, the noise ordinance does not protect me. I live right next door, and sound, I was a DJ in college. Sound can have consonants and be beautiful, but noise is always dissonant. Noise is always, when I'm home and I'm watching Family Guy on a Sunday and I can't pick out the dialogue in the show because I'm hearing like thump, 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 and I'm feeling it because bass radiates and goes all over. Sound waves are bouncing off the buildings on 9 Mile. My point is that we need to change the way that we measure, or the way that you're looking at what you're calling sound, because, you know, as some of you have already noted, the way that you're measuring it has worked for things that are enclosed, but when you've got sound amplified outside, it really is causing a nuisance to me and the people in my building. And I also want to add that we are residential after 7 p.m. We do have businesses in my building, but they close by 7 p.m. So after that hour, really everyone in my building, and we've got 11 units, we're all residents. Please do something to protect us as well. Thank you.
Okay, Dave Cottrell from 1610 Beaufield. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to just address the DDA aspect of the downtown noise problem, which is why is the pipes and music coming out of the speakers along 9 Mile Road downtown? Can music just blast in your ears and disrupts conversations? I walk 30 feet and get another blast in my ear and another conversation interrupted. I don't think the canned music is needed or useful. Really, after 8 p.m., the downtown hasn't been walkable for citizens. It's walkable from traveling from the Troy parking lot or residential streets to the bar. And I really think Rosie O'Grady's belongs in an industrial area, like next to a stamping plant or near a freeway exit ramp. I don't think it really belongs in a downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amanda Catdeal. I live at 315 West Troy. On August 3rd, I was standing outside a voting precinct asking for signatures on the related petition at the legal distance, of course, otherwise it'd be bad. But I'm just here to relate a lot of major things that a lot of people agreed upon, reactions I got. One of them, which you've sort of heard, is that Ferndale has become unwalkable, and that citizens who used to enjoy walking in downtown Ferndale are now bombarded by noise and just don't want to go down there anymore. And a lot of them, I got a lot of signatures from people who were just tired of their friends complaining about it, so they signed it to hopefully help things move along so that their friends wouldn't be complaining about it anymore, so that they wouldn't have to hear about it. A lot of signatures were also, and reactions I got, were a lot of people, even though they didn't live down there, they sympathized and would not want to live where we are or be in our position. And glad they aren't. When people asked about the petition and I explained it, a lot of people's first thoughts were to Rosie's. And though I mentioned that Rosie's was not the only establishment that an issue has been brought up about, people still believed and perceived Rosie's as the biggest threat I guess would be the most appropriate word. Just
Thank you.
so you know.
Thank you, appreciate that. We have a motion and a second, do we? Yes. Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do.
All right. Yes.
Yes, all right. I have 2 letters from one woman who lives on Saratoga, the southwest corner. She needs to get up at 5 to take care of her grandchildren so the parents can work, so she has a letter. She'd mentioned Como's first in it. I have one from a woman who had foot surgery on Wednesday who's lived here all her life. On West Troy, her father bought the house on the GI Bill after being in World War II, including the Battle of the Bulge, which has the injuries he's been living with ever since. He's 94. And so I have those 2, and then I have my own comments. Give them to her right now, or?
Sure.
All right.
Well, or, yeah, you can make your comments and then turn them in, and she'll give us copies.
One comment that we have heard a couple times is, well, when you bought your house downtown, you knew you lived downtown. Well, as Ann Muller said, yes, I've lived downtown my whole life, 61 years, and it's been busy, and it's been something that had a variety, so it had something for everyone, and it was livable for the residents. The DDA, City Council, and the establishments, when they were prospecting Ferndale as a possible place, also all knew they were downtown residents. As you heard me say before, I had the best Boston clam chowder I've ever had at Rosie's Chesterfield Township site, where you can't see a house in sight. I agree with some of the conversation about the decibels is just not measuring what the problem is. The model ordinance, our city ordinance is 75 daytime, residential mixed. The model ordinance says 60. The proposed one we have is 65. Nighttime, the city is 65. The model ordinance was 50, and we were saying 60. So there are ordinances that can go much lower than that, if that's even a relevant issue. There was a newspaper that did a survey of customer gripes about restaurants. In the top 5 was noise. AJ's has music. AJ's has the loudspeakers inside. It doesn't have complaints. He's able to fill up his facility. He's able to put on some events that bring attention to Ferndale, and he's able to do that without disturbing the neighbors. We have no diversity, little diversity in the downtown, whether that's a lack of creativity in seeking establishments, I don't know. But how loud is too loud? The comment, the right to swing your arms, ends with the other person's nose. The right to be loud ends with the other person's ears. It's just sensible. Loud enough for the targeted audience. But we in the neighborhoods do not want to be the audience. If we want to be the audience, we can do what Ms. Muller said she did for the 50th birthday party of the Mustang. She went on to 9 Mile Road, she heard the music halfway across the parking lot, back to back home, and she didn't hear it anymore. And she didn't have to hear it anymore. 298, for those at home, says, anytime a sound disturbs, annoys, or endangers the calm, comfort, quiet, repose, that's an old-fashioned word for sleep and rest, health, peace, or safety of others beyond the immediate vicinity of the disturbance. And that doesn't take numbers. Plainly audible is a test that some of the newer ordinances going around our state are using, and it's perfectly adequate. We also have in our proposal, and we do have enough signatures, but we'll give you some time, the special events, that those also be reduced. One of the semi-trucks that has the amplified bands on there, I could hear the words they were singing when I was on Albany. That's 2 streets south of 9 Mile Road, halfway between Allen and Woodward, and I could hear the words. That's way beyond, that's hardly the targeted audience. Last night, for a couple of minutes, I could hear patio conversation at Rosie's with no loudspeaker, nothing coming out of the loudspeakers. It felt like background. It was fine. It was comfortable. The people were not shouting and yelling at each other because they didn't have anything to shout over. It sounded like they were having a nice out in the air good time without being rude, obnoxious, or anything but slight background. Another one of our residents has 4-year-old twins. She's at least 200 feet from Rosie's. They won't go to sleep until after 2 o'clock in the morning. They're going to be starting school this fall. The sleep deprivation that this is causing is affecting my work, my relationship with friends and family. My friends are tired of hearing it too, hearing about it. My daughter sleeps when she's not working at a job because she's up until 3 or 4 doing mindless things because she can't do anything that would be studying or concentrating or anything. So she's sleeping all day practically, then she goes to work. And it's time for her to be able to participate much more in our family, and they're not allowing that. She gave up her room so that I would stop complaining. I'm still complaining because this is just not a life, and I don't appreciate that. But I do appreciate listening, and I do hope that you will do something, and we can hang on to our petitions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a motion and a second, do we not?
Could I have that motion read? I apologize, I was away from the table when it was made.
To refer the noise ordinance to the ordinance committee?
I'm sorry?
The motion is to refer the noise ordinance to the ordinance committee.
Thank you.
Yes, with input from the staff and some possible thoughts back to us by late August, early September, consideration of bringing in Dieter as a consultant. So that is the motion. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Council members Piana?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
Yes.
And Mayor Covey.
Yes, passes unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's next, please?
That brings us back to consent agenda item C, approval of the contract with the Daily Company for City Hall reorganization.
Right. Mayor Pro Tem Baker asked that it be pulled. Mr. Brunner, do you want to briefly
Sure.
intro it?
The City Council awarded the project to the Daily Company on July 26th. Since that time, the City Attorney has been working with the Daily Company to finalize the contract, and it has been finalized and is presented for your consideration.
Thanks.
I believe Councilman Piana pulled
I'm
it.
sorry.
That's okay.
Councilman Piana, did you pull this item?
I did pull this item. One, I know we got these as attachments today, and I have not had time to review them myself. So I feel a little uncomfortable approving these contracts today. So I think we need to talk about options so that we can address these in a fashion that satisfies the city manager and the will of council. I was wondering, Bob, if you could tell us what some of the implications may be if we choose not to consider to table this
for 2
today.
weeks. Bob?
Well, the goal is to have the City Hall staff vacate the second floor during the first week in September. So I'm afraid that delaying consideration of the contract for 2 weeks until August 23rd would put a major kink in our schedule. I'd have to talk to the Daily Company tomorrow to ascertain exactly how big of a problem that would be, but my guess is that in order to keep the project on track, we would want to consider perhaps coming back for a special council meeting to reconsider it before the 23rd.
If I could ask, although Melanie pulled it, I would have, not because I don't want to go forward with the project, I do, I just have not yet read it. It came on Friday afternoon, and when it came without any information in the body of the email, of the person who sent it, I assumed it was a draft. It said draft. I thought it was a draft. I just want to read our contract so that I can ask the appropriate questions before we approve it.
Well, if two council members both have questions about a contract of this size, which is fairly substantial, it seems to me that unfortunately we probably ought to, unless you wanted to throw together a special meeting in order just to deal with that issue.
It's fine with me.
If it impacts timing in a negative way. Councilman?
Oh, I just, Dan, in my practice, I don't work with AIA contracts regularly, but this is a standard form with a few modifications. Could you perhaps give us a high-level overview of what we should be looking for in this? I assume that the items with lines down the margins are those items which have been changed from the standard form document, and there is some black lining in here, but other than that, is this?
Very minor.
Okay. This
Very,
is
very minor, but it is a standard AIA contract designed specifically for an owner with a design builder, which is what this contract is. It incorporates and references the June 10th and July 2nd communications from the Daly Company. It also does incorporate the specific terms and conditions that are tailored by the AIA, which is Architectural Institute, International Institute for Design Build Programs. It provides certain insurance protections and performance and payment bonds as required on municipal projects. And so the form of the agreement is appropriate for council's consideration, but obviously the specifics, I mean, it is a very comprehensive contract. It has a lot of detail with respect to the rights and obligations of both the owner and the design builder. It does incorporate the specific GMP gross maximum price document that was provided to council at its last meeting. But I think that if council has questions regarding what's in it, it should take time to go through this document.
Well, I absolutely agree. But as far as the scope of work or whether we're going to be replacing this or just updating that, that's not described in this document. This is almost purely legal terms relative rather than definite, describing what is going to be performed and that type of thing.
That's exactly right.
And are these AIA documents intended to be builder-friendly, owner-friendly, or are they sort of neutral in your experience?
Well,
or I suppose it's all subjective, but
these documents are prepared by an architectural, I mean, typically they're architect-oriented slightly, but they are documents that the city has used with respect to other projects in the past, and it is a commonly accepted contract for construction projects in the industry.
And as we go through this and look at it, doing our due diligence on behalf of the city, could you provide us with any guidance as to what sections we might want to take a closer look at?
Well, I mean,
is there anything that varies? I mean, I assume that
what's very important, obviously, in Article 4 is the cost of the project. It's cost of the work plus design builder's fee, which is specified, and in 4.43 provides a guaranteed maximum price of $447,930, which council already approved at its last council meeting. It also provides for the certain allowances that are set forth in that GMP document that council previously saw, and it provides terms with respect to the applications for progress payments, which are important, obviously, but are pretty typical from the standpoint of processing. The terms and conditions was a portion of the document which took some time to develop. Initially, the builder had proposed using the terms and conditions for a general contractor rather than a design build contract, so they did not correspond with this type of contract document, and that's what the delay was in getting this communication to council, and that was not received until Friday afternoon.
And would it be fair to say that those items in the first section, numbered, Article 1 through Article 8 are, the more, were those the ones that were, more heavily negotiated, and that the items in Exhibit A are more properly characterized as, boilerplate?
What's very important is this contract incorporates and adopts by reference the June 10th and July 2nd proposal of the design builder, and that really sets forth what the design builder is committing to for the specific dollar amount set forth in Article 4. Now, council already has seen those communications at its last council meeting, but this provides the contractual obligations to obligate the design builder to undertake what is set forth in its proposal.
Okay. Councilman, are you good, or you want to ask some more?
No, I guess that.
I guess I'm concerned that I don't want to mess up the schedule, and I'm concerned about that. But we don't have a motion yet on the floor. Councilwoman, do you want to make a motion to table, or did any of that satisfy you? And it's okay if you want to take more time.
Kate, did you have a?
Yeah, I've got a question, and actually, I did get some answers from Bob, which I guess if they're, satisfactory to the rest of the council, I certainly have faith in Dan negotiating contracts. But my questions had to do with payments and with change orders as they pertain to the guaranteed maximum price. And I emailed Bob this afternoon to let him know that I likely wasn't going to get through this before the council meeting. And I do often, trust our attorney who sits up here, Councilman Galloway, who, I appreciate that you dig through contracts. These were the questions that I had for the city manager. I wanted to know how we were paying. This is a guaranteed maximum price. Are we paying up front? Are we paying monthly? Are we paying at the end? How did this happen? Or how does this happen? It's laid out in Article A, section, or Exhibit A, Section 9. We're paying monthly based on progresses with the city manager.
Good.
Let me know. I was also wondering how we would get out of the contract if we chose to. This is something that has come up in the past at this table. We've wondered how long it takes to terminate things. That is something that I haven't yet completely read. And Bob pointed me to Exhibit A. It is in Section 9, 9.5, and in Section A, decisions to withhold a payment, and then it moves on. And what he did tell me was that changing our mind is not a cause. So once we, just to be clear, once we sign this,
sure.
They begin to move forward. And if we decide that we don't want to move forward with it because of a reason that's not outlined in this contract, we're not able to terminate the project.
I understand that,
Okay.
sure.
I then also asked about change orders and whether or not Bob was confident that the plans that our staff had communicated to the Daly Company and Newman Smith, and then the plan that they'd subsequently come back with, was close enough to what we needed to avoid what could be potentially costly change orders. A number of changes to that plan could result in us getting lower end furnishings, for example, or taking, trim on the front of the building that might not match what's there, or perhaps even eliminating certain items because we have given a guaranteed maximum price. Bob did say that he believed that they'd refine the scope of work enough to avoid change orders. Obviously, there are no guarantees.
Sure.
But I know the staff's been working on it. So if we at the table are comfortable that we're moving forward with something that we're not going to change our mind on and try to go back and undo in a couple months, because we all understand now that if we move forward with this contract, we can't stop just because we change our minds, then I'm comfortable approving it tonight.
Okay.
But truly, I really wanted to talk about that up
And
here.
that's okay.
Okay.
Of course. Absolutely. It's a big
There
project.
are some ways that we can withhold payment. It has to do with the work not being up to par, work not being completed within a certain time frame.
Right.
But it's not just because we don't like it and we don't want to do it anymore.
I understand that, and I also have a great amount of trust in our staff as well as the city attorney to know that we can. Councilwoman, how about you? Are you satisfied, or would you prefer to move a table?
Well,
Move a table.
my interest is making sure that we stay on schedule, and everything that Kate said about the contract management are concerns that I had, in particular with change orders, since this is a large sum that we are spending on reorganizing the city hall. However, I don't feel like I've had adequate time to review it, though I do have trust in our legal review and Scott and our city manager and staff. That's where I am with that.
I appreciate that.
I mean, all I would say is that this is a big deal, and, you know, I would like to get it moving forward in the beginning of September, but if 40% of the city council is uncomfortable moving forward now, I think we need to take a step back and make sure that they have the comfort that they need to vote on probably the only major renovation to City Hall in our lifetime.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if it's the concept or if it's the actual contract, because the contract is basic boilerplate. We have chosen the company, and we have chosen the concept, we've chosen the amount of money to spend. So I guess it's sort of, now's the time then to say, okay, let's sign this and move forward. Either we're going to reorganize this. But since there is no motion, I will wait and see what comes from the table.
It is a boilerplate, but it's a boilerplate I haven't seen. I'm not in the business of reviewing contracts. If the city attorney and Scott are comfortable that this is a respectable document, which I know that it is. It's an AIA document. It's something that's used in the architecture and construction fields regularly. I believe it's even the document that we probably requested when we began looking at changes to the municipal complex well over a year ago. So I guess to stick to the timeline, I would be comfortable moving forward if our attorneys, I don't want to throw it to you guys, but if you guys were comfortable that AIA template is something that the city can rely on to protect our interests.
Well, just on that point, there's many different AIA contracts. There's a host of different series of documents. Part of the task in the review was to make sure that the exhibits that they referenced in the series was consistent throughout for a contract between an owner and a design builder. That is, in fact, what this is. It incorporates the attachments and exhibits that were previously reviewed by council. But again, if there's a concern, I mean, it's long. I mean, I think that council needs to be comfortable with this action. It is a significant dollar investment. I am comfortable with respect to the form of the agreement that it's in an acceptable order to protect the city's interests. But there's a lot of, but it's a 35-page document.
Well, I guess I'm comfortable with the concept, and if the city attorney is comfortable with the document, with the additional information that we got tonight that we didn't have over the weekend, then I would be comfortable moving forward.
All right. We then need a motion one way or the other. And I'll be happy either way.
I'll make a motion, unless you want to. I would move to approve the contract between the city and the Daly Company for the City Hall reorganization project, and to authorize the mayor and the city clerk to sign it.
Support. Motion made and seconded. Baker Galloway. Thank you. And is to go ahead and approve this contract to move forward then with the City Hall reorganization. Any further discussion?
Well, just that I didn't vote originally to spend the money on this project, so I'll be contradicting myself for voting for this contract, although I have complete faith, and I appreciate what Dan has done as city manager and the Daly Company, but I would look kind of foolish voting for this.
Appreciate that. I appreciate the staff working hard on this, and I also appreciate both councilwomen and Councilman Gallo. I'm not an expert. I wouldn't purport to understand contracts, so I appreciate you looking at them closely and asking those deeper questions. Appreciate that, Mr. Counselor, Attorney. If there's no other discussion, Madam Clerk.
Councilmembers Baker?
Yes.
Galloway?
Yes.
Lennon?
No.
Piana?
No.
Mayor Covey?
Yes. Motion passes 3-2, I believe. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
That brings us to council liaison reports, if any.
I have none. Anyone? Any liaison reports? All right, then are we to call to council?
We are indeed.
Fire Chief Sullivan.
Mayor and Council, we recently had a fire this weekend. I'll be bringing it to the next council meeting where our team did a good job putting it down, but we had 2 young men enter the building with no regard to their own lives and helped assist in rescuing animals and looking for the lady that lived there. So I want to recognize them in the future because they both felt that they did not do anything outside the ordinary when in reality...
2 of our firefighters.
No, 2 teenage kids.
2 neighbors.
Entered the building without, and it was right before the point of what we call flashover, where everything was superheated and charring at the level of the ceiling outside of the room which was on fire, which was the kitchen, and it was ready to all ignite. Had it done that, they would have both been severely burned, if not killed. So,
what was the cause? Do you know?
It was something went wrong with the stove. She heard a pop for some odd reason. She said she was up at 2 a.m., which she's normally not. And by the time she made it to the kitchen, everything under the stove and coming up was on fire. Seeing that it doubles in size about every 15 seconds, it didn't take long for the whole kitchen to catch fire. So she barely made it out and didn't have any of her pets. She raises miniature pinchers. Had a cat and 2 African grays, but the 2 African gray birds died. They taken with smoke inhalation. So those 2 birds died. I guess they're about $1,000 a piece. And she just got them to the point where they were talking and at the training phase. So that happened there. And then we had a liquid nitrogen leak of no severity, but as you know, our gas is nitrogen in the air, but liquid nitrogen could freeze you and damage your soft tissues readily. But over here in the industrial section, it popped, and some people noticed some fog or steam, and they called it in. But it wasn't nothing endangering anybody. But and police department did a really good job of giving us wind conditions and cordon off the area, and we got in there and found it was a broken pipe, so they shut it down.
Does everybody have electricity in Ferndale tonight?
As far as I know.
As far as you know.
Not that I'm superstitious, but keep knocking on wood on that one.
We'll see you tomorrow evening as well.
We'll see you tomorrow evening.
Special council meeting.
You got it.
Thanks, Chief. It looks like the police chief might have had to leave, and that's okay. I saw Byron Fotides, the DPW director, earlier, but I think he left as well, so we'll assume all is well with the DPW. Oh, Chief, is there anything else you wanted to share with us from the police department?
Yes, I do. I would like to thank the folks at the First Methodist Church in advance of Wednesday. Apparently, they want to have a Police Appreciation Day, and they're sending lunch over for the day shift, the afternoon shift, and the midnight shift, and I wanted to be thankful of them. They also sent us some water a while back that they blessed and sent bottles of water for the officers a couple of weeks ago. That was very nice. Also, congratulations to the mayor on your election there.
Thanks, Chief.
And we have had some larceny from autos on the west side recently. There's been a whole string of them. I'd like to remind residents to keep their valuables outside of their car overnight. The afternoon shift just did arrest a youngster that had quite an extensive history of theft, and in his possession were some of the GPS units, still with the addresses of the owners right on them in Ferndale. So we hope that's going to curtail some of those thefts, but it is a good reminder to keep your valuables in your house when you park your car for the evening.
And lock the car.
And lock your car. We've also had some bicycle thefts of late. We also caught a couple of folks doing that, but this is the season. The Ferndale 115 did a nice article after an interview with me with some tips for everybody on how to prevent bicycle theft, if they'd like to take a look at that. That's all I have tonight, though.
Your auxiliary and your regular patrol were very, very helpful for the Ferndale pub crawl this year. Again, no problems, no incidents, but we largely think that's partly a result of the bicycle patrol and the auxiliary. So we will be thanking them publicly, but please let them know we're appreciative as well.
I will do so. Thank you.
And are you ready for the Dream Cruise?
I hate the Dream Cruise, but we're ready as we can be.
We all love the Dream Cruise, but we're ready for it. Sherilyn Tallman, anything from the clerk's office?
Quickly wanted to report, for those who didn't already know, that voter turnout at the August primary was 20.26%. That's best numbers for an August primary. And also wanted to let people know that the Oakland County Director of Elections and the clerks from Royal Oak Township, Oak Park, and the deputy clerk from Ferndale will be meeting with the Ferndale School Board on August 16th at 7 p.m. to ask them to consider changing their school board elections to the November election. Any interested residents, council members who believe that that would save the city money, which it will, and save the schools money, which it will, I encourage you to come out and support us in this quest. That's 7 p.m. Monday, August 16th.
Sherilyn, have we had any luck in setting a date for the joint council school board meeting?
I am waiting for 3 council members to respond to me on whether or not they are more available on Tuesday, September 14th, 21st, or 28th. So far, we've got 2 members who are available the 21st, and that would be Councilmember Baker and Councilmember Lennon.
Am I one of them?
I need to hear from you.
I'm good on any of them.
On any of them.
Put me down for any of them.
Okay.
Thanks. It's an important. I think it's a good thing that I think Mayor Porter started joint meetings of the school board, and so I hope we can set that up. Usually it's August, but we'll do it in September.
Yeah, they're nice.
And nice job. Your staff worked hard. It's not easy putting on an election, and they work long hours. They have to learn new technology. Some of us, some of them old, at my age and older. So we appreciate the hard work, and I know it's a long day for y'all.
It is.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
City Manager Bruner, what would you like to share?
Just to reiterate a couple things from earlier in the meeting, if folks have specific question or specific addresses that they want to hear from DTE about, what happened in my neighborhood, call the City Manager's Office 248-546-2360. Give Shirley the address. We will forward those addresses on to DTE so they can give a report on those specific neighborhoods in the city and what happened, why they were without power. And then also, as it relates to the committee on the city's finances, the Blue Ribbon Committee, the council took the first step towards forming tonight. If folks are interested in that, I would also ask that they call the manager's office, 248-546-2360. Give us your name, phone number, email address. We can start collecting the names of interested people now and hopefully expedite the process of getting that committee appointed and started, because whether the council ends up putting something on the February or May ballot, if it does go that route, we've got a lot of work to do between now and then to fully evaluate all the options and to bring the community up to speed on why this is happening and what will happen if there isn't a millage proposal. So all the information from last year's budget process, or I should say the budget process from earlier this year, is still on the city's website. Folks want to go back and review that information. All the presentations that I give at these meetings are all on the website. I forget sometimes because I live through them that they're archived, the video, all the agenda items, they're on the internet for folks who want to refer back to them. So I encourage folks to do so.
Councilman, you and I could sit and watch all of the city manager's past presentations.
I would love that.
Okay, let's do that sometime.
There's the water meter, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the parking study guy, too, yeah.
Those are the great
Bring them all
ones.
in.
Thanks. Dan, Chris?
Nothing-
City Attorney?
nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Piana, what would you like to share?
Just to follow up on what Mr. Christie said about the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Committee tomorrow night, I am presenting on Complete Streets and why this is important to Ferndale and what's happening at the state and federal level and what could this bring to Ferndale and all of the other cities that pass Complete Streets ordinances and or resolutions. So I invite you to come join us at the Kulik Center starting at 6:30. I will be immediately ending and then going over to another city council meeting for interviews of the police and fire chiefs, and I invite people, that's an open meeting, so invite the public to join that as well.
That's at the Kulik Center.
Mhm.
Councilwoman, you presented that same presentation to the Ferndale seniors, and I know it went well. I'd like to see it or hear it. Do you have it anywhere, or have you considered writing it down or putting it in the form of a blog or a video presentation?
I wish I was that technical to do a video presentation. I've asked the city manager and the city clerk to allow me to do something different when I bring the ordinance for council consideration to give my presentation up here at the table. So I will do that as well.
Like a 10 or 15-minute presentation?
Yes, a very short one. And the presentation has changed since I gave it to the seniors a few weeks ago because state law has changed. And so I will update that in the presentation and what the implications are for every city, township, and village in the state of Michigan.
Cool. I'm very interested. Thanks. Thanks. Councilman Lennon?
It's through the chair of the city manager. Bob, it's a late hour, but I wanted to get a report on some VSIP personnel that are still here. So why don't you give us something in our Friday packet? I know we brought back a lot of people who are still under contract, but what kind of movement have we made on a transition period with those people and why they're still here, et cetera, et cetera? Because I don't want to hear it right now. It's 10:30.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Status.
That's all. I attended the pub crawl. I had a good time.
Thank you. Thanks for helping out.
Yeah, I've been pretty short over the past few weeks, but I have a couple things this evening. 2 or 3 years ago, we passed a resolution up here regarding a bicycle-friendly community, and the League of American Bicyclists, after we made application, gave us some feedback, and I believe there's a standing resolution, perhaps, regarding reports to us regarding non-motorized transport and efforts to implement that. Maybe we could dig that materials out and forward it on to Councilwoman Piana to
Inform the ordinance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The second thing is we instituted an abandoned house committee, and now I think, with the exception of the mayor, we're all South Enders. And any of us who are down on the south end of town are noticing a lot of abandoned houses, and I think it's something that the city needs to move on, and I'm not sure exactly why it hasn't been implemented and why we're not moving forward on that, but I'd like to get it, either get it up and running or get some insight as to why that's not taking place right now. On Sunday, the 15th, or 16th of August, our dear friend Ray White's celebration of his life is going to take place, as was stated at the United Methodist Church. And I've been asked to speak. Mayor Covey has as well. And one of the things that always stands out to me was the little stories and jokes that Ray had. But for the life of me, I can't remember any of the jokes per se. But if anyone in town remembers some of Ray's sort of corny jokes, I'd love if you could forward them on to the clerk's office, so perhaps I could include those in my comments. Sure. And then finally, it's been brought up repeatedly over our discussions regarding a possible millage, this idea that the city council should have seen the historic collapse in property values. And as stated earlier in my comments, I don't think anybody saw a 50% collapse in housing values And even if they had, perhaps one person in the country did, but even if that were the case, I guess it begs the question, what would we have done with that information? The city would not have preemptively sought a $5.5 mil Headley override. No one would have believed us had we told them, and it wouldn't have passed at the time. We wouldn't have cut expenditures on public safety at the time because there'd be no need to. The revenues were still coming in, and coming in even after property values started to stagnate and fall. So whether this council should have or should not have seen an unprecedented collapse in property values really is beside the point. Even if we had, I don't think that we would have acted any differently. I would not have laid off or voted for layoffs prematurely of any staff members, and I wouldn't have voted for a tax increase prematurely of any, of our millage rate. So it's really, I don't even know what the purpose of saying that we should have seen that is, other than just to make political hay. So the city council, as long as I've been on it, has balanced the budget every single year. And that hasn't always been easy. When Mayor Porter, was up here, we regularly cut $1 million, $1.5 million out of the budget through some pretty contentious debates to get that done. This year was completely unprecedented. I had hoped that I would never have to go through it again, but having been reelected, it looks like I'm going to have to go through it 3 more times. But the fact is that this council does cut when it needs to. It does balance its budget, and although I hate the metaphor, it operates like a business or a household in that regard, in that when the revenues aren't coming in, we cut, and there's only 2 things we can do. We can raise taxes and fees, or we can cut services and personnel, and some people seem to that seems to be lost on some people, as though we could wave our magic wand and pump up property values. I'm sure, Mayor, if you had a magic wand for property values, would have, started to utilize that already, as we all would. So it's just silliness. I understand that people are upset. I'm upset. A lot of things that I had hoped to do have changed as a result of this crash in property values, but this council is dealing with it, and dealing with it quite well.
Well said. Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
First, to echo the thank you to the clerk. I was here, until probably 10 o'clock, and you guys were here well after on election night, so thank you again. And I am remiss in not calling the mayor. I was traveling right after the election. I should have called you on my long car ride to Grand Rapids to congratulate you on your election. So I will do it here publicly and formally. Congratulations to our hopefully new county commissioner. I am also personally particularly pleased that all 3 of the millage renewals for Oakland County passed. Part of what makes our community and our region, I would normally say strong, but we are all struggling right now. One of the things that will, I hope, help improve our property values in the future are these shared public services that we pay for through millages, things like the Smart Bus and our county parks. I'm particularly pleased that those passed. Also, wanted to let the residents know that the Fern Care Free Clinic had its official opening this Saturday morning. We are in a temporary location for the next few months at the Coolett Community Center. www.ferncare.org has details about how to make an appointment. We saw about 12 patients on our first morning, which was just about perfect for your first morning as a free clinic. We had just a wealth of knowledge there in medical personnel, and we have actually several, or 2, from what I understand, nationally recognized doctors coming to our next open clinic. We'll be open 2 Saturdays a month, and we hope to be open 1 Friday evening as well at this point, with more hours to follow. So thank you to everyone who has worked on that, to my fellow board members, to all of the volunteers who were there at the opening, and everyone who has contributed and hustled and nickel and dimed our way to a free clinic. It is open, we are serving patients, and we are taking appointments. All the information is available online to make an appointment. Councilwoman Piana and I had what I think was an excellent meeting with our provisional interim, I don't remember your title, Kevin, Fire Chief Sullivan on Saturday morning, and what was planned to be a breakfast turned into a 3-hour encampment in a side booth at Nello's, I think. And it was a fantastic conversation, and although I've known Kevin's family and I've known Kevin in a small way for several years, and growing up, my parents knew his family, I really felt like I got to know you a lot better that morning, and really appreciated our conversation, and think that we will be moving forward as a team, which is what I'm really hoping we'll be able to do up here as council and with our department heads and appointees in the future, is move forward as a team in a collaborative way. That's me tonight.
Good show. One of the speakers today, to compliment what Councilman Galloway said, railed against us for cutting police and fire, and then demanded that we not raise taxes. There's so much dissonance there that it boggles the mind. You can't have it both. If you want to keep the full complement of police and fire, we would have to jack up taxes big time. And closing the Coolidge Center, it wouldn't make any difference. So people need to really understand. They need, if they want to really have an impact, they need to get smart and understand what's going on with the economy. Councilman, you were exactly right. That's why we had to cut, just like you do at home. You cut the cable if you can't afford to pay the cable bill. As we move towards a resolution to try to moderate some of the noise and problems with a few of the neighbors in the downtown, I hope we don't swing the pendulum too far. Many of us worked hard for decades to bring our downtown to life, and there is a balance, and that's what came out of that meeting that Councilwoman Piana and I were at, is that there's balance, and that one man's noise is another man's music, or one person's sound is another person's noise. So I've heard people talk about all sound ceasing at 7 p.m. I've heard people talking about the idea of banning all outdoor music. I would caution people not to go too far in one direction, that again, your 7 p.m., it may be late in the evening, and it might be very early for someone else. We live in a 24-hour time frame now. This isn't New York City, but it's not Mayberry either. And so there are people who work at nights and work in the mornings and work in the afternoons, and who sleep in the day or sleep at night and sleep in the morning. There's a compromise, and there are ways, God forbid I talk about ways to ameliorate the sound in your home, so I'm not going to go there anymore because it keeps coming back. But there are ways to deal with noise. And finally, I want to congratulate and thank the opponents that I had in the primary. There's a primary election, and that is that Rule McPherson from Hazel Park and Tamiko Gumbleton, former councilwoman here in Ferndale, both ran very strong, very hard-working professional campaigns, and they made me hustle big time as well. And I think that's good. I think it's good for democracy that we had to get out there and work and walk door to door and work hard. And so I compliment both of them on a hard-fought campaign that was successful, and we are, in this case, all Democrats. So those who are already calling me commissioner are way premature. There is an election in November. I have an opponent on the Republican side, and that's when the voters will get to decide for sure. But thanks for a well-run campaign that was clean and in the spirit of democracy. And again, thanks, Cheryl Lynn. There is no special meeting after this, so I may close the meeting and do so. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Good evening. You don't have a special meeting, right? No. Thank God.
What's that?
We're never going to have a quiet building.
Oh! take a look?